Chapter 1334, Confrontation with Eternal River Tear. Chapter 1334, Confrontation with Eternal River Tear. One younger and the other older, one stronger and the other weaker, and both were standing on opposite sides of each other. The difference in strength was as large a disparity as the gulf between heaven and earth, but in terms of aura, Ling Han was not the slightest bit inferior. How many people would dare look an eternal river tear in the eye like this? Putting aside the clash of eye contact like this, even a sliver of the aura from an eternal river tear would be able to crush a sun-moon tear into dust. It is unfortunate that you are not a member of our Sect clan. After a while, Xie Qian spoke up and said such words in an incredibly regretful tone. This was the first person he had seen that could endure the heavenly tribulation with such ease. Even he, an elite of eternal river tear, had to admit he was impressed and was filled with strong admiration for Ling Han. However, it was too bad. Who asked Ling Han to have killed his descendant? Members of the Sect clan could not be humiliated. Hence, he could only feel regret because a future King Tier, or perhaps even a top-grade elite, would soon die in his hands. This caused him to feel regretful and rueful at the waste of precious resources. But it was only that. He had been alive for several 100 million years, so how could it be that the number of prodigies who died at his hand would be few? To an elite of eternal river tear, a half-day's time would be like a blink of an eye and would very soon pass. The heavenly tribulation dispersed as suddenly as it had appeared. It ended astonishingly quickly, without the slightest warning. Quang, after the last bolt of lightning had descended, the thunderclouds that filled the skies completely disappeared in a single instant. Xie Qian made his move. As he stretched out his right hand, a galaxy appeared, where several 100 million stars were floating, and it pressed down on Ling Han. Every star was filled with the power of a heavenly body tier elite, and with several 100 million attacking at the same time, it was equivalent to the power capable of destruction of a world. And this was only a sliver of divine sense from Xie Qian. Boom! Read more chapter on novel full. When this attack landed, a massive pit was blasted into the ground. It was as wide as 100 miles and a dozen over miles deep, showing how terrifying the power of an eternal river tier elite was. And this was still because this was the two-realm battlefield, which was located in a strange space. Otherwise, if he had used the same attack in the outside world, then there would definitely not have been the slightest hint of life left within 10,000 miles from the epicenter. The crushed rocks and dust formed a huge mushroom cloud, which rose up into the skies. A sliver of shock appeared on Xie Qian's face. That was because in the instant before his attack landed on Ling Han, the latter had disappeared. He curled his hand carelessly, and a gust of wind instantly rose up, sweeping aside all the dust and rubble that filled the area. Where was he? A pondering look appeared on Xie Qian's face. He definitely had not sensed the shock wave that came from a rip in space, so Ling Han could not have fled with any kind of instant teleportation seal. Furthermore, it would also need time to activate instant teleportation. With that attack from him, even if Ling Han possessed an instant teleportation seal, he would not have been able to use it. Moreover, this place caused the range of his attack to decrease greatly, but it was also the same for an instant teleportation seal. Even if Ling Han had truly teleported instantly, he would not have been able to escape out of the range of his attack. He would still have died. However, Ling Han had disappeared as if he was air itself. Strange. Xie Qian mumbled involuntarily. It had already been many years since he was last moved, yet today, because of a sun-moon tier youth, he had been moved 2 subsequent times. I am really now quite curious. What tricks has this boy actually gotten hold of? He released his divine sense from his body, and it rapidly stretched out over this area, searching for Ling Han's whereabouts. Doing this instantly caused the other heavenly body tier elites to feel shock. What did you mean by releasing your divine sense for no rhyme or reason? Were you trying to pick a fight? Eternal river tears were too powerful, and if they released their divine sense without any qualms, they could all extend it for 10,000 miles. They could release a powerful attack in this effective area, just like how he had attacked Ling Han previously. If this was his own territory, that was fine. So what if he released his divine sense? Who would dare to care? But this place was different. There were several dozen Eternal River Tier elites, and if anyone released their divine sense, it could possibly be treated like a provocation by the others. Putting aside the fact that there were still Netherworld elites here, even if they all belonged to the same force, they might not be able to trust him to this extent and allow themselves to be enshrouded by the divine sense of another. What if he suddenly rose in revolt? Then it would be indefinite what kind of suffering would await them. Before this, every Eternal River Tier elite had all pulled back their divine sense into a very, very small range to avoid provoking others and causing an unnecessary misunderstanding. But precisely because of this, no one would think that Xietian would have been so outrageously bold to actually want to oppose all the Eternal River Tiers here. Putting aside the fact that Xietian's battle prowess might not be the strongest here, even if it was, being ganged up by so many other elites, he would definitely be finished as well. Thus, everyone was curious. What was this Xietian doing? Xietian was not in the mood to care what the others were thinking. He did not think that he would be ganged up on. After all, they were all Eternal River Tier elites. If there was not deadly feud between them, they would not rashly start a fight. Of course, he could not go too far either. Otherwise, once an alliance formed, then he could only flee pathetically. He would definitely lose and die if he went head-on against them. But no matter how much he stretched out his divine sense in search, he did not find Ling Han's whereabouts anywhere. This caused his expression to become increasingly odd and also more serious. There were already not many things that could cause him to look at with much importance, but this definitely could be considered as one of them. Xietian, have you done enough? An Eternal River Tier elite asked coldly. Stretching out his divine sense without qualms like this, weren't you deliberately provoking them? Once was enough, but if you continued to do so, that was a little too far, wasn't it? Did you really think that you were the king of Eternal River Tier? Xietian frowned. He knew that the tolerance level of the other elites had reached their limit. Immediately, he slowly drew back his divine sense. This divine sense was like the sea waters that were at low tide and quickly retreated from all directions. And when his divine sense retreated to that ancient coffin, he suddenly started. Woo! He released a muffled humph, his expression instantly twisting in an inhuman look. His divine sense went berserk like a tsunami and began a barrage. It was in that one instant that at least a few hundred people had their spirits directly shattered and became zombies, and there was an Eternal River Tier elite from the Netherworld in that area as well. He had also been attacked by Xietian's divine sense, so he immediately flew into a thunderous rage. With a loud roar, he began to attack Xietian. However, he had not yet shot out his palm when his expression turned ashen in shock. That was because Xietian's present appearance was too appalling. Black blood was pouring out of all his apertures. If this happened to a mortal, he would definitely not be living too long after. Immortals naturally would not die just from bleeding from their apertures, but a great Eternal River Tier elite would actually look so tragic. What exactly was wrong with him? Killing members of our Netherworld, do you not feel that you should provide an explanation? This elite of the Netherworld asked coldly. Those who had died just now were all people of the Netherworld, and furthermore, they were all related to him. Otherwise, they would not have been qualified to stay by his side. Yet Xietian only acted as if he had not heard anything. His hands were covering his ears, and increasing amounts of black blood surged out from his eyes, nostrils, mouth, and ears. The blood seeped through his fingers, and 4 heavenly bodies appeared. But each heavenly body was actually exploding. Every heavenly body that exploded would mean a slight decline in the power of an Eternal River Tier. Though there were several tens of thousands stars in the galaxy, it could not hold up to such depletion either. Not too long after, they would all explode into nothing. How different was this from committing suicide? Crazy. He had really gone crazy. Chapter 1335, Rapid Change of Events. Chapter 1335, Rapid Change of Events. Xietian's hair was down, his face covered with black blood. He looked like a vengeful ghost. One after another, heavenly bodies exploded, forming a frightening shock wave. And what was more astonishing was the fact that Xie Qian's spirit was also burning. Those in the range of several thousand miles from him could all see this clearly. Bai Chong, you actually dare to sneak attack an elite of our immortal realm. Dressed in bright yellow robes, Gu Su stepped out, exuding a powerful, forceful aura. He was a leading character of the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire, as well as the great-grandson of the Crimson Flame Emperor. He was thought of as the most likely person to inherit the imperial throne, and indeed had the majestic presence of an emperor. Even if one's cultivation level was equal to his, there were extremely few people that could match him in terms of forcefulness. Previously, the Netherworld elite that had been attacked by Xie Qian's divine sense, who was also that Bai Chong Gu Su was speaking of, couldn't help but look furious. What had this to do with him? He was the one who had had a sneak attack launched on him, all right? Just look, he hadn't even fought back, and had already seen Xie Qian's whole face was covered with filthy blood. He looked like he didn't want to live, and couldn't continue to live, but was this even the slightest bit related to him? If he truly had had such power, would he have had to tolerate and be patient previously? He would have merely directly cast a glare and thrown over a punishment. If the person that had spoken up to reprimand him was a minor character, he would naturally not be angered. Instead, he would directly stretch out a hand and press it down on the speaker. However, this person was presently Gu Su. Whether it was status or abilities, the latter was superior to him. This caused him to feel both angered and aggrieved. Fuck, what basis did he have for wronging him? Gu Su, have your eyes gone blind? An elite from the Netherworld side also walked out. He was dressed in a green suit of robes and looked to be no different from any ordinary person, but his eyes were astonishingly like two rubies, which made him look very bizarre. Gu Su couldn't help but look solemn. Regarding the passageway of the two realms in the Cloud Apex planet, the other end was the Long Wind planet of the Netherworld, and this man was the imperial uncle of the Green Gauze Imperial Empire of the Long Wind planet, Fu Donglu. He was a considerably powerful elite with an extremely far-reaching history. He accused Bai Chong of launching a sneak attack because Xie Qian's reaction had been too profound and baffling. Furthermore, it was also a blow to the morale of the whole immortal realm. Just look, they hadn't even started fighting, and you were already bleeding from all your apertures, so frightened that you exploded your heavenly bodies on your own initiative. But if he declared that it was because he had received a sneak attack from the Netherworld, the result would be different. He looked at Fu Donglu, his gaze sinister. In the first place, it was impossible for the two realms of the immortal realm and the Netherworld to have peaceful relations, and this had been decided based on the shape of their lives. It was also decided by the regulations of the two realms. The only reason why the two sides had not started fighting was because the ancient coffin implicated too much, so both sides were tolerating the other. Now, Xie Qian suddenly went crazy, and this had become the last straw, instantly causing the atmosphere to become incredibly tense. Ah, Xie Qian shouted loudly. He was burning his own spirit and had shattered his own heavenly bodies. In that short instant, his battle prowess could be said to have risen to its maximum, easily breaking through the limits of the high extreme of Eternal River Tier, and reached the peak of the consummate level. This was an explosive burst that came from burning one's spirit, and there was no way back. Even if a saint moved, he would not be able to reverse this process. Which also meant that Xie Qian was definitely dying. But when he had yet to die, his battle prowess would also become incredibly frightening. He could practically turn up his nose on the whole Eternal River Tier. He was no longer shattering his own heavenly bodies, but was rather beginning to attack the masses. Boom! It was earth-shattering and incredibly terrifying. Moreover, he completely did not differentiate between his companions and enemies. He attacked the netherworld beings as well as those from the immortal realm. Damn it! Damn! The expressions of all the elites changed drastically. Though they were all in the Eternal River Tier, there were still 4 differing levels of Eternal River Tier. There were very few that could advance into the consummate level. Now that Xie Qian's battle prowess was shockingly in the consummate level, or had even reached the peak extent, it could be claimed that even if the Crimson Flame Emperor and the Blue Cloud Emperor arrived personally, they would not dare say that they could surely suppress Xietian. If this kind of elite suddenly went berserk, who wouldn't be scared witless? Those below the consummate level had all joined forces. Otherwise, they would only be killed by Xietian. Those in the consummate level, meanwhile, needed not be so pathetic and could hold on with their own battle prowess. Boom, boom, boom. This was a battle on the level of the Eternal River tier. If they had started the battle in an ordinary situation, it would have been conducted in the skies, but now it had started in the middle of a crowd. This naturally caused extremely frightening death and injury. In those few breaths' time, at least 1/3 of the people had been killed by the shock waves from the battle. This was a slaughter that differentiated between no one. Both the immortal realm and the netherworld were treated the same. There was still a considerable number that had not died, and they all used their strongest treasures. They had been given these treasures by the Eternal River tier elites. Otherwise, even one on the level of Heavenly Body tier would be useless. Once a shock wave swept over them, even one at the peak of the Heavenly Body tier would be turned into dust. So what kind of defensive effect could the treasure they forged have? You deserve death. Now, not only had the eyes of the elites of the netherworld turned bloodshot, even those of the immortal realm were no exception. There were really too many prodigies of the younger generation in this place, but how many could possess Eternal River tier level or even saint level treasures like Qi Huangji and the Stone Emperor? There were innumerable casualties and fatalities. It was only a short instant, yet the whole cultivation world of the Long Light Galaxy would probably decline to a drastic extent for the next 10 million years. Of course, the netherworld was the same. The effects of this would be very far-reaching. These elites all moved with their all, wanting to kill Xietian to prevent him from prolonging the slaughter. Normally, so many elites joining forces would be sufficient to suppress any Eternal River tier elite, but the problem was that Xietian had already gone insane. He was burning the fires of his soul and was extremely crazy. He completely did not care if he would be wounded or if he would die. With this level of craziness, who else could stop him? Xietian barged around violently, and the masses could only resist his attacks. Thankfully, the fires of the spirit would be exhausted eventually at most in about 1 day's time. Even if it was an elite of Eternal River tier like this, with an incredibly strong spirit, there would still come a time when it would be completely burnt to nothing. Amidst this kind of chaos, no one realized that the spirits of those living beings that had been killed had floated into the ancient coffin one after another. No, it should be said that the ancient coffin was releasing a mysterious attraction, causing those spirits that should have returned to nature to become incapable of returning to the heaven and earth, being forcefully sucked into the ancient coffin instead. There was also a change discernible to no one taking place in this mountain-like coffin, because this was a trick performed by a severing mundane elite. Even saints could not possibly detect this. Those below Eternal River tier had all began to flee. Thankfully, there was a great number of Eternal River tier elites helping them to forcibly restrain Xietian in a certain range. This gave the rest a chance to flee. However, one after another, terrifying shock waves of energy were still wreaking havoc, and if they were caught in them, the only result would be death. It was only such king tiers like the Stone Emperor and the others, who themselves were in the Heavenly Body tier and also possessed rare treasures, that could easily flee as far as 10,000 miles away. Finally, they left the range of Xietian's attacks. As for the others, even those like the Cloud Maiden and Yu Ying were battered and exhausted. If they had not died, it was already thanks to their sheer good luck. No matter how much of a prodigy they were still so weak as to be unable to withstand a single blow in front of an Eternal River tier elite. Even so, 99% of the young people present here had all died. A great number of living souls had been sucked into the ancient coffin, stimulating the ancient coffin to begin a further change. Ka, ka, ka. Loud sounds were heard from the ancient coffin, and the coffin lid was actually slowly opening. Chapter 1336, Great Slaughter. Chapter 1336, Great Slaughter. An ancient coffin that seemed as if it would not change for eternity suddenly released a loud commotion. Instantly, this caused the hearts of all the surrounding Eternal River tier elites to clench. Even if they had never experienced it themselves, they had also heard of this kind of legend. An incredibly powerful existence left behind a fated opportunity. As long as someone could help his daughter reincarnate and come back to life, they would be taught a supreme secret technique as reward. All of a sudden, they all wanted to stop fighting to snatch this fated opportunity. However, the world changed whether you wanted it or not. Xietian was like a mad dog and was still unendingly attacking. He had completely lost all his reason, and his only remaining thought was killing and death. A Grand Eternal River Tier elite had actually fallen to this level. Just the mere thought of it would make one sigh. Cracking sounds were still ringing out from the ancient coffin. The top that had initially been like a part of one solid object had separated, revealing a massive coffin lid. Like a thundercloud, it was astonishingly huge, casting a very long shadow. The elites were all filled with expectation. Perhaps the key to their surpassing the Eternal River Tier and advancing into Saint level lay here. Boom! A pillar of light shot up into the skies, directly blasting a hole in the ground above it. It penetrated the chaotic space of the two-realm battlefield, and at the same time shot into the skies of the immortal realm and the netherworld, exuding endless brilliance. It was brighter than the sun, and could be seen clearly even if one was an entire galaxy away. All the Eternal River Tier elites flew up into the skies, wanting to begin a fierce competition. But it was at this moment that the light pillar that had shot up into the skies actually began to spin at an incredibly fast rate. Even Eternal River Tiers were unable to evade. Schwa, in an instant, it had spun several tens of thousands of times. All the Eternal River Tier elites released terrible cries. To their horror, they realized that their spirits had been ignited, their heavenly bodies shattering automatically as if they were adding flammable liquid to their spirits, causing their spirits to burn fiercer and fiercer. It was completely unstoppable. This was rushing on the path to death. The only difference separating them from Xietian was that one had lost all reason and had completely no idea what he was doing, whereas they clearly realized what was happening now, and this also scared them out of their wits. Death was not frightening, but watching helplessly as they walked towards death, this kind of experience was definitely not something anyone could bear. Yet no one could resist. Even the great elites of the Eternal River Tier could only watch helplessly as their souls burnt brightly. Their life essence was being released in an extremely short amount of time. How shocking was it to have so much life essence from Eternal River Tier elites? Innumerable grass and flowers actually sprouted on this barren land in a single instant. These stalks of green grass were visibly boring out of the ground, sprouting, growing leaves, and flourishing well. Finally, flowers bloomed. A fragrance wafted in this air, causing this underground world to transform into a place like paradise on earth. However, the price for this was too massive. Several dozen Eternal River Tiers were endlessly burning up their life and vitality just to exhibit this show to present the miracle of life. Every Eternal River Tier elite released furious roars, trying their best to struggle out of this crisis, but it was useless. A powerful energy that far surpassed their life level was acting on them, reducing them to meat on a chopping board which could only be slaughtered as the cook pleased. Just like Xietian, they could only persist for a single day at most. At the end of the day, they would all be burnt to nothing. Even if their bodies were still present, without their spirits, they would only be mere corpses. This was a great slaughter, and was also a tragedy that had not happened in the long light galaxy for billions of years. Several dozen Eternal River Tier elites were all simultaneously slaughtered, setting a new precedent. In the Black Tower, Ling Han and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden were both dumbfounded with shock. Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was shocked from hearing Ling Han's retelling of the present situation, which caused her to be incredibly stunned. In her eyes, Eternal River Tier was equivalent to an invincible being. Yet now these invincible elites were completely helpless, and their spirits were all burning. Looks like Ding Zijian had not told us the complete truth, Ling Han uttered darkly. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden nodded. Every Eternal River Tiers would be burnt, and perhaps even saints would be helpless as well. Then who else in this world would be able to revive Ding Ling? Not only had he not told us the truth, I'm afraid we have been used, she deduced. The reason that Ding Zizhen buried his daughter here is probably related to the fact that this place is the two-realm battlefield. Ling Han nodded. In these millions of years, who knows how many people have died, and how much blood has been spilled in this place. Though I do not know how exactly the spirit of a dead person could be regathered, I think it should be linked to death and bloodshed. Then the two-realm battlefield would be the most suitable place. Accumulation for millions of years. It has probably reached a certain critical point, and that is why this place has appeared, the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden continued. Making living people into a blood sacrifice should probably be a procedure of the second stage, Ling Han said. The 5 sects could refine a realm pill, so Ding Zizhen's methods must be even more astonishing. Using souls as his raw materials to refine a truly incredible alchemical pill to regather the soul of a person who has been dead for who knows how many years, so she would be reincarnated and come back to life, Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden said. The two of them shared a look and could more or less deduce the truth of the matter. But the problem was they were completely incapable of interfering and could only sit and watch in the Black Tower. If they went out, the only path was death. I hope Rabbit and that perverted ginseng are all right. Faceless and the others should have already fled. Ling Han sighed. Probably. Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden nodded. Faceless and the other King Tiers fled fast enough, and their abilities were considerably extraordinary as well, so it should have been no problem for them to escape. Although the cultivation level of Rabbit and Old Ginseng was not high, they were extremely slippery. Their skill in escaping was top grade. If it was in mere terms of survival abilities, they could be compared to a heavenly body tier. But the Purple Moon Divine Maiden would be, Ling Han and Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden spoke at the same time, but fell silent all of a sudden. They were both indebted to the Purple Moon Divine Maiden, but in the present situation, it was completely impossible for them to go out and rescue the Purple Moon Divine Maiden. This caused them to feel terrible, and at the same time, were filled with fury towards Ding Zizhen. It was one matter for you to want to revive your daughter, but to make so many pay with their lives, that was too demented. From a certain aspect, there was no difference between Ding Zizhen and the 5 sects. They had both killed innumerable living beings through their schemes. Pa, pa, pa. One after another, elites burnt their flame of life completely, their bodies collapsing. On the surface, they did not seem to have the slightest injury, but in truth, their souls were already gone. So they had died completely and absolutely. Boom! Another pillar of light shot out of the ancient coffin, and it was far wider than the previous one. In the middle of this pillar of light, the figure of a woman was slowly appearing. Her limbs were drooping as if she was asleep, but also as if she was in a coma. At present, she was only left with skin wrapped around her bones. She was dressed in a long green skirt that fluttered lightly in the breeze. A strange event followed. Her skin was presently becoming plump, as if the water of life had been injected into her body. Starting from her right leg, her dry skin was rapidly becoming tender and soft, and then continuing upwards. However, it was only limited to one half of her body. It could be clearly seen that her initially shriveled hip was slowly becoming erect, solidifying, becoming well-rounded, and her breasts were also slowly raising up, with a deep ravine between the two mountains, astonishingly curvaceous. Finally, it was the face. Her lips were like fire, and her complexion like jade. Her hair had also recovered its luster, revealing a beautiful set of features. However, this was also only one half of her body. Xiao, the pillar of light suddenly vanished, and that woman was still standing in midair. Her eyelids trembled, and she opened her eyes. Pretty unclear how the halves are divided. It sounds like the front half. Maybe? Could be just left or right, but it doesn't sound like it. Chapter 1337, A Sorrowful Conclusion. Chapter 1337, A Sorrowful Conclusion. Boom! A frightening aura spread out. It was saint level. In this galaxy, this was an invincible force. Unless the celestial realm sent out an army, No one could match that kind of power. However, this incredibly powerful woman grabbed her head as she screamed in pain. A frightening shock wave of power spread out from her, sending boundless waves of dust. Boom, boom, boom. They shot out into all directions. Pa, pa, pa. Cracks also appeared on the ancient coffin beneath her, and it suddenly shattered, turning into millions of pieces. This should not have been caused by her, but rather said that this ancient coffin had completed its mission. Otherwise, wouldn't any saint be able to come and open the coffin, and thus ruin Ding Zixian's plans? Why have I become like this? This woman wailed to the skies, her voice filled with resentment. The present her could definitely not be considered any kind of beauty. She couldn't even be considered a normal person. One side of her was beautiful as jade, whereas the other side was skeletal in appearance. To a woman who prized beauty, this was unacceptable. Furthermore, even if she reached Genesis tier, she could not possibly regrow her flesh and blood, because this had not come from an injury. Rather, it was the reassembly of a departed soul and reigniting life and vitality in a body that had long aged and died. This method could be considered nature-defying, yet there was obviously a miscalculation on Ding Zixian's part. Though he had revived her, only one half of her body had recovered vitality and life. This was a fight with the heaven and earth. No matter how powerful you, as a saint, were, how could you possibly win a fight against the heavens? Thus, it was definitely impossible that she could heal the other half of her body, unless the same method was used another time. However, the ancient coffin had been destroyed. It should be the key to the process, and without this kind of object, this woman obviously would have to live on with this kind of bizarre appearance. If Ding Zixian had not lied on this matter, this woman should be Ding Ling. She released an enraged shout, sounding incredibly severe. Boom, boom, boom. She waved her fists endlessly, pounding the ground until it was all scattered and smashed. However, this place was the two-realm passageway, where strange regulations were active. Furthermore, the composition of heaven and earth here was extraordinarily sturdy, so it had actually withstood the full force of a saint wreaking havoc. I hate you. I hate you. Ding Ling called out loudly, and suddenly slapped a palm into her own forehead. Pa! Her forehead suddenly exploded, and even her whole body had turned into innumerable bits and pieces. She had only been revived for a few breaths' time, and she had actually committed suicide. Shio, her body turned into nothing, but a crystal that was only the size of a finger dropped down from the skies. It had actually withstood the full power of a saint without being destroyed. Ling Han recounted the scene he had witnessed to the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden was initially stunned, but then sighed. She said, "If I was her, I may choose the same end." Why? Ling Han asked. To a woman, especially a beautiful woman, beauty is the most important, and its importance has even surpassed the importance of life. Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden said slowly, filled with sympathy. If my appearance was ruined, I definitely would not want to see you again. I would rather commit suicide and destroy my own body so that you would eternally remember me when I was at my most beautiful. Ling Han shook his head and took her lightly into his arms. He said, "Never have that kind of idea. As long as you are still alive, everything could be changed, but if you are dead, that would be the end. Nothing could be changed by then." The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden nodded, but Ling Han knew that she had not heard what he had said. If she was really unable to recover her beauty, she would still make the same choice that Ding Ling had. Women would be so incomprehensible at times. Ling Han sighed and came out of the Black Tower together with the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. There was still a majestic aura undulating in the air. That was the aura that belonged to a saint. Even if she had died, it could still exist for a very, very long time. This kind of ending was probably something that Ding Zixian could not have possibly imagined. He'd spent all this strenuous effort and schemed for who knew how many years, yet his daughter committed suicide right after coming back to life. But according to Ling Han's deduction, even if he'd known this would have been the conclusion, there would have still been no change to Ding Zixian's decision. He would have still chosen to use innumerable lives in exchange for a chance for his daughter to revive. Even if it was just a short instant, he would be satisfied. That was because he had tried his best and had given his daughter the chance to make a choice instead of dying helplessly in the hands of his fiancée. Ling Han couldn't help but ask himself, if it was him who had this kind of chance, what would he do? Would he become crazy for his son's sake? No matter what, the only thing you can depend on is having extremely strong abilities, Ling Han said. Only when one was strong enough could he prevent a tragedy from happening, and no matter how much compensation was made after the matter was over, there would still be regrets left after. N. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden nodded. When she saw Ding Ling's end, she was also filled with a strong feeling of vigilance. Ling Han picked up the crystal that Ding Ling had left behind, and it was in that single instant that a memory that did not belong to him suddenly appeared in his mind. At the same time, he felt as if someone was staring at him. This memory was the complete tide of the ages. The golden sand extracted from here could not possibly contain Ding Zizhen's complete memories, after all. Thus, though small tower had extracted one tide of the ages, which had also been grasped by Ling Han, it could not be considered as the true tide of the ages, but now it was complete. This crystal, could it be a precious treasure that Ding Zizhen had brought out from his fiancée's clan? Was that why it could condense a departed soul through these many years to allow Ding Ling to come back to life? And since Ding Ling possessed the bloodline of the Ding clan, she naturally also possessed Tide of the Ages. Ding Zizhen had tricked everyone. He completely had not planned to teach this secret technique of his clan to anyone. However, life was variable, and it had still fallen into Ling Han's possession. Still, what about that feeling of being observed? Since this was the treasure of some force of the celestial realm, it had to have its own mark. Perhaps it had been suppressed by the ancient coffin, and so did not leak out, but now that it had fallen into Ling Han's hands, this mark was activated, allowing that clan in the celestial realm to discover his existence. Ling Han hurriedly entered into the Black Tower with the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. Time was too short, and perhaps that clan still could not confirm his exact location, but his appearance and aura were probably all known to the latter. They had not even entered into the celestial realm yet, and were already in trouble. Ling Han used the power of the Black Tower to wash away all signs on the crystal, and then began seclusion with the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden needed a large amount of time for appreciation to increase the extent of the regulations of heaven and earth that she could grasp and increase her level at the pinnacle level as much as possible until she reached the peak. Ling Han was also just a mere step away from the peak of the pinnacle level. He, too, needed an extremely large amount of time to break through to the heavenly body tier. The powerful figures of the Xie clan all knew that Xie Donglai had died by his hand, and while Xie Qian had died, there were still heavenly body tier elites in the Xie clan, though their exact cultivation level was unknown. Thus, if Ling Han wanted to go back and destroy the 5 sects, he had to first have enough power to oppose the Xie clan. Otherwise, he would have to crush the 5 sects on one end, whilst having to deal with being hunted down by the Xie clan. What was he to do then? Hence, he would rather charge up to the heavenly body tier in a single go, and then seek out the 5 sects to call them to account. In any case, it was only a matter of a few years. The two of them entered into seclusion. With the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill, they did not have to worry about the accumulation of origin power, and merely had to concentrate on increasing the appreciation of their cultivation level. Very soon, Ling Han ingested the last Berserk Blood Spirit Pill that he could take, and pushed his cultivation level all the way up to the peak of the pinnacle level. Next, he began to seclude himself to understand the mysteries of the heavenly body tier. Theoretically, he had not used much time to enter into pinnacle level, so he should advance into the heavenly body tier at an even more rapid rate. Yet the truth was not so. He kept feeling as if there was a barrier in the heaven and earth, which caused him to be unable to cross over even after a long time. He came out of seclusion and asked for guidance from the notionless saint. Only then did he know that there was a so-called age barrier. There was number 100-year-old heavenly body tier in this world. Ling Han naturally would not believe that. How old was Hunyeo? Not only had she long since entered into the heavenly body tier, she had even rushed all the way up to Genesis tier. So, how could there be a so-called 100-year-old age barrier? This could possibly be relevant to beings of the immortal realm. Thus, Ling Han could only spend more time on comprehension. At first, he had thought it would be an additional few months' time at most, but the time required had far surpassed his expectations. Depending on the Berserk Blood Spirit Pill to forcibly increase the accumulation of origin power, finally revealed its disadvantage at this moment. Every 3 months, Ling Han would stop to temper his body in immortal flame. 3 months had passed in the outside world, but in truth, he had comprehended Tao for close to 100 years. 200 years, 300 years, 400 years, time passed quietly by. Ling Han was still unable to take that most crucial step. This allowed him to know that the reincarnation tree also had its limits. The heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had already ingested another Berserk Blood Spirit Pill, and under the condition that she was comprehending Tao beneath the reincarnation tree, she had advanced into the late stage of the pinnacle level. Another 3 years later, she had finally advanced into the peak of the pinnacle level. By now, she had already caught up to Ling Han in terms of cultivation level. But this soon became a matter of the past, because Ling Han finally attained enough appreciation of cultivation, and the great doors to the heavenly body tier opened up to him. Chapter 1338 Breaking Through to Heavenly Body Tier. 1338 Breaking Through to Heavenly Body Tier. The heavenly body tier meant to birth heavenly bodies in one's dantian. In theory, suns and moons could also be considered heavenly bodies, but on the path of cultivation, this was different. From the sun-moon tier to heavenly body tier, it represented an evolution of the inner world, becoming more and more well-developed. Just like how cultivators could fly after breaking off from gravity, this was a qualitative improvement, and flight that could traverse between planets, or even galaxies, was an even more colossal change. The heavenly body tier was like that. Even though he merely had to condense a single star now, the difficulty level was extraordinarily high. It was high enough to cause Ling Han to have to comprehend Tao underneath the reincarnation tree for more than 2,000 years, and only then did he attain the required understanding. This time was not the slightest bit long. Sun-moon tiers could possess 4 million years of lifespan, at most, but how many people in the consummate level of the sun-moon tier would spend their whole lives striving and die of old age, still trapped on this level? They were uncountable. Even for those who could cross over this barrier, they would have to spend about 1 million years at least. Of course, there were also prodigies like the Stone Emperor and Qi Huangji, who could break through in 100 to 200 years. That definitely had to be because they had borrowed the help of some kind of treasure. Just like Ling Han, though he had comprehended Tao for more than 2,000 years, the fact was that only 6 years had passed in the outside world. Completing the crossover in 6 years' time. No one would be able to believe this if he told them. Yet Ling Han did not become complacent. He had thought of Hunyao. How many forces were there like the Rock Palace in the celestial realm? Even if they could not nurture a Genesis tier every 5 years, if they could even produce one every 50 or 500 years, how many young prodigies were there in the whole celestial realm then? It was just like there were very few shattering void tiers in the small world, but what about in the immortal realm? Cultivating a few years, and they could reach this kind of height, and in the celestial realm, perhaps a great many people would already be on this cultivation level upon birth. Since he had come from a small world, it was definite that he would have to blaze a new trail and begin from the lowest level. Ling Han did not think this was a weakness. Contrarily, the fact that he walked all the way from the beginning allowed him to stabilize and strengthen his foundations to an even sturdier extent. Furthermore, any force with the slightest bit of power in the immortal realm would send their juniors into a small world, where they would return through opening the sky to compensate for their natural disadvantage. Random thoughts sped through Ling Han's head, and an incredibly brilliant point of light lit up in his dantian. This was the model of the heavenly body. Ling Han was filled with anticipation for the heavenly body tier. When he reached the heavenly body tier, the 5th floor of the Black Tower would be opened, and the 5 elements would be complete. He would then be able to further grasp the indestructible heaven scroll. Additionally, the notionless saint would also be able to restore his body and walk out of the Black Tower. That was a saint, and though he had to start all over again, he would definitely improve his abilities at a frighteningly fast rate. More importantly, only heavenly body tiers would be able to fly in the immortal realm. Come, Ling Han said to the heavens, his black locks dancing in the wind, exuding an intimidating aura. Boom! Thunderclouds suddenly gathered densely, and blazing white lightning could vaguely be seen flashing within. He could also see a sliver of blue lightning, though it was not very obvious. The might of the lightning had been improved. Ling Han had heard that the heavenly tribulation of a saint was completely filled with blue lightning. Meanwhile, the reason why heavenly body tiers could be considered elites in the immortal realm was because there was a sliver of blue lightning in the heavenly tribulation they had to endure. It was a mere sliver, yet it caused Ling Han to feel a powerful sense of danger. It was not that he had not experienced the heavenly tribulation of a heavenly body tier. Previously, when he had fought with Xie Donglai, the latter had been going through a heavenly tribulation and had even attempted to stimulate the power of the heavenly tribulation to target him. However, the power of Xie Donglai's heavenly tribulation had definitely not been as powerful as this. This was very normal. One had broken through from the consummate level, whereas the other was breaking through from the pinnacle level. Though both of them were advancing into heavenly body tier, how could the difference in might be less than 10,000-fold? In the tribulation clouds of Xie Donglai, there was so little blue-colored lightning that it was practically invisible, and he had still sent some splashes onto Ling Han, so its might was naturally even smaller. Come. Ling Han was filled with anticipation. The more powerful the heavenly tribulation, the stronger the might of lightning he would naturally be able to grasp. Unfortunately, he did not have enough godly metal in his possession to improve the divine demon sword, which made him feel extremely regretful. Quang. As if it had sensed Ling Han's provocation, the first flash of heavenly tribulation suddenly descended, forming a lightning bolt that was as wide as 30,000 meters. Ling Han was unafraid. His physique had already advanced to the height of level 9 godly metal, and even if this heavenly body tier heavenly tribulation was obviously tens of thousands times stronger, it would not pose much of a threat to him. On the contrary, he took the initiative to shatter his godly bones to be tempered by the heavenly tribulation. This was his true trial. In these 6 years, he had gone through 20-odd times of tempering his physique through immortal flame altogether, and had more or less reached small accomplishment level in his grasp of rising from the ashes. Now, he could recover to a state of body of about 18 years old upon ending his tempering of the physique through the immortal flame, even if there was a slight sliver of shortcoming. Moreover, he had completely regained all the abilities that he should have. However, both he and the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had been cultivating in seclusion all that while, so there had not been any time for him to seek out the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden to show how manly he was. Understanding endlessly swept through Ling Han's heart. He had already shattered into innumerable pieces of bone and bits of flesh as dense as the stars in the sky, but a mysterious power allowed him to maintain his life energy, and that was because he had cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll to a certain extent. If it had been another person who did the same, they would have definitely experienced a severe wound to their vitality. At the center of these stars, a point of light was incredibly bright, and it was presently growing in size. At first, it was really just a point of light, but now, it was about the size of his little finger, exuding the power of a heavenly body. This was Ling Han's first heavenly body. After opening these great doors, a different scene appeared in front of Ling Han's eyes. He only had to concentrate, and he could grasp multiple orbits sweeping through the heaven and earth. Those were the regulations of the heaven and earth. They flashed and then disappeared, so it was extremely difficult to glimpse their movement. Thus, grasping the regulations would be a long and drawn-out process. Ling Han grasped these orbits. The first one he had to grasp was the power of flight. This was not difficult. That was because the regulations concerning flight numbered the most and streaked through the heaven and earth most frequently. No wonder every heavenly body tier was capable of flight. That was because this was the easiest ability to grasp. Half a day's time passed. With a thought, a drop of indestructible true fluid was channeled through his body, and he immediately recovered to his prime condition. "Rise," he said lightly, and his feet suddenly left the ground. He stood in midair, floating. He had cast away the restrictions of the ground. Ling Han laughed loudly. With a thought, he rose through the skies and traveled back and forth through the heaven and earth at an astonishingly fast speed. This was a qualitative change from sun-moon tier to heavenly body tier, so his speed had naturally exceeded his previous speed a great many times. From this moment on, I can finally be somewhat considered an elite. Ling Han exhaled, a smile shaping his expression. There were a lot of things he had to do, but the first one was to rebuild a body for the notionless saint. Ling Han went back into the Black Tower. He immediately discovered that this precious tool was different, but he could not put his finger on exactly what was different about it. Small Tower appeared and calmly said, "With all 5 elements complete, you can think of it as a true world of its own." Ling Han did not manage to ask the details, and so said, "I want to rebuild a body for the notionless saint. How should I do that?" Chapter 1339, 5-element body. 1339, 5-element body. Simple. Using the power of the 5 elements, you would be able to build a 5-element body, Small Tower said calmly, appearing completely nonchalant. True. The Black Tower should also be an ultimate precious treasure in the celestial realm as well, and in the celestial realm, there had to be plenty of saints. Hence, in the eyes of Small Tower, the notionless saint had to be no stronger than any ordinary dog. "Teach me," Ling Han said. This was something that he had promised the notionless saint, so he definitely had to fulfill his promise. Small Tower taught him a chant about how to condense the 5 elements to form a 5-element body. Furthermore, it also added a forbidden secret technique within this chant. With a thought from itself or Ling Han, they could easily destroy this 5-element body. This was a just-in-case measure. As long as the notionless saint bore no malicious intent, everything would naturally be fine. But what if he wanted to turn the tables around and snatch away the Black Tower the moment he recovered the cultivation level of a saint? Ling Han hesitated slightly, and then passed his agreement on Small Tower's action. One had to keep his guard up against others, so it was best to be cautious. Additionally, if the notionless saint bore no malicious intent, then this preventive measure would never be activated in future when Ling Han's cultivation level also advanced into the Genesis tier, as he naturally would not need to take this to heart any longer. As long as the raw materials were ready, condensing a 5-element body would become very easy. Very soon, Ling Han had built a new body, then used a certain power of the Black Tower to activate it, and this body now possessed a powerful vitality. Without a soul, it could not be considered a living being, but it was the best object to possess. With a thought, Ling Han built another body like this. This one was prepared for the Azura Demon Emperor. "Senior, this is the 5-element body I promised you," Ling Han said, and placed this body underneath the reincarnation tree. The ball of light that the notionless saint had taken form and trembled wildly. Though he had long since prepared himself mentally, when this moment truly came, even he, a saint, would feel uncontrollably moved and excited. However, a saint was a saint. After all, he had endured who knew how many trials and hardships, and quickly calmed his heart. With a flash, the ball of light that he had taken form and had sank into this body. Pa! A finger of the 5-element body slightly moved. Suddenly, his eyes opened, and the upper half of his body was erect. Now, this was the notionless saint. He raised a hand and looked at it in excitement, an expression of wild happiness appearing on his face. Even if he was a saint, he was still unable to make his damaged soul possess another and come back to life. Now, he could feel that he was weak but filled with vitality. Though this body had been built from the 5 elements, it was not much different from a mortal body. Presently, the notionless saint was only an ordinary mortal. However, this body possessed unlimited possibilities. He could cultivate to the shattering void tier, heavenly body tier, or even Genesis tier. Furthermore, with the thought of the notionless saint, an incredibly majestic aura immediately surged out of him. This was the aura of the Genesis tier. Within the Black Tower, Ling Han naturally needed not fear the aura of Genesis tier, but he could acutely sense that the notionless saint was actually strong in appearance, but was weak in reality. This was indeed the aura of a saint, but there was not the slightest destructive power contained in it. It could only be used as a scare tactic. If he encountered a rash hothead that moved with complete disregard, then this notionless saint would definitely be pummeled to a bundle of wounds and bruises, exposing his true self completely. There was nothing that could be done about it. At the time, the notionless saint had refined himself and merely left behind a ball of pure experience, and the body he possessed now was a mortal body as well, so he naturally could not possibly have the slightest bit of the might of a saint anymore. Being able to have this kind of aura as a scare tactic was already quite good. Senior, recover your cultivation level as soon as possible. Ling Han left behind some alchemical pills. With how bountiful the natural resources and extraordinary the effects of godly medicine in the immortal realm were, it would be enough to help the notionless saint return to the mountain river tier in the shortest amount of time possible. After the mountain river tier, the notionless saint possessed a complete set of cultivation experience, so he would only have to accumulate some origin power, and his cultivation level naturally would soar up quickly. All right, go on, this old fellow. The notionless saint was a little overexcited that he didn't even know how to address himself anymore. Go on. I need to go into seclusion to cultivate. At least I have to cultivate to mountain river tier first. Ling Han smiled and summoned the Azura Demon Emperor with a thought. My noble master, what is your command for summoning this incredibly loyal little Azura? The Azura Demon Emperor said in his most bootlicking voice. His eyes were bright. Master had broken through to the heavenly body tier. This speed was inconceivable. Naturally, the more awesome his master, the more he could use his powerful connections as an intimidation. Hence, in front of Ling Han, he put on his humblest attitude to gain Ling Han's favor and trust. Ling Han tossed out the 5-element body and said, This will be your body from now onwards. Work hard on cultivation. Without another word, the Azura Demon Emperor immediately entered into the body. To him, Ling Han's words were akin to a royal decree. Master, why is this body so weak? However, he was immediately shocked. He had initially thought Master had given him another powerful body, but this body was pitifully weak. Of course it's weak. This is a mortal body, Ling Han said, smiling. The Azura Demon Emperor was filled with confusion. Ling Han said, Though this body is not powerful, it possesses true vitality and life. If you cultivate with this body, you can obtain endless possibilities. Though it is very weak at the moment, I believe that you would be able to surpass your current cultivation level without taking too long. Furthermore, you are a spirit of the netherworld, yet possess a body of the immortal realm. By nature, you would be able to communicate with both realms, and in future, it is very possible that you could grasp the regulations of the two realms at the same time, and break through to the Genesis tier. Only now did realization dawn on the Azura Demon Emperor. He almost broke out into tears and said, Thank you for your concern and care, Master. How is this little Azura deserving of such high hopes from Master? This little Azura will definitely strive to the utmost until my dying day. Naturally, these were merely empty words. Only he himself knew how much of what he said was truth and how much was false. It was an incredibly hard thing to become a saint, and he was supposed to climb a level higher than that. The Azura Demon Emperor naturally did not have that much confidence in himself. His ambitions were very simple. Be a good dog for Ling Han, so he could bite anyone he wanted anywhere he liked. Ed was filled with confidence in Ling Han, and thought that Ling Han would definitely be able to become a saint in the immortal realm, and if he entered into the celestial realm, he would also definitely be capable of becoming a powerful figure. Ling Han couldn't help but be amused, though his expression did not change. He coldly uttered, "Work hard on your cultivation. If I discover that your rate of advancement is slower than the other side, I will murder you." Ah! The Azura Demon Emperor howled. It should be known that the notionless saint had once been in existence of Genesis Tier, and even if both of them were now presently starting from the beginning all over again, the latter's rate of advancement would definitely surpass his. Then wouldn't he definitely be dead? "Master!" he exclaimed miserably, his face filled with ingratiation. "If you have the time to curry favor, why don't you make the most of your time to cultivate?" Ling Han humphed. Oh! Azura Demon Emperor could only nod and race back to the roots of the reincarnation tree to cultivate. It was time to seek out the 5 sects for an accounting. Ling Han walked out of the plains and flew up into the skies. What had been a deep abyss in the past was no longer a problem to the present him. The evil beast that had released a pulling power had already been killed, and he soon arrived on the ground surface. Chapter 1340 Arriving at Heaven's Sword Palace. 1340 Arriving at Heaven's Sword Palace. More than 6 years had passed. In this period of time, some great elites had come to investigate the situation. There had even been 2 saints who came personally. They were the Stone Emperor's father and the North Emperor's master, respectively, but they did not discover anything out of the ordinary. The strangeness should have to do with that ancient coffin, but now that the ancient coffin had shattered, even saints would not be able to extract any kind of clue from it. Hence, after the many elites died, there had once been a period of furor in this place, but it very soon returned back to a peaceful state. By now, things had once again returned to the usual rhythm of the 2-realm battlefield, and that was killing others, earning merit points, and gathering some realm spirit stones while they were at it. Ling Han strolled around. He no longer had any equal opponent in this place. As long as they had not exceeded the Eternal River tier, his present abilities would be able to handle even one in the high extreme of the Heavenly Body tier without any problems. He journeyed on in silence and returned to Wolf Fong City. He closed his account of merit points and took out a large amount of alchemical pills to be sold, with all of the income being used to trade for level 8 godly metal. However, level 8 godly metal was really very expensive. Others would only need about the size of a palm, or at most about the size of a human head, to forge any god tool that they wanted. But in Ling Han's case, the divine demon sword was completely unreserved in swallowing the godly metal, so he required an ocean's worth of it. He had really gotten himself a master. Thankfully, the Black Tower had now opened up to its 5th floor, with the 5 elements completed, and basically formed a world of its own, so it could slowly produce various materials in large amounts. As long as Ling Han was given enough time, he could still improve the divine demon sword up to celestial level. With regards to time, it might be tens of thousands of years, or could be several 100 million years. Even Small Tower could not say for sure how far the Black Tower had developed by this point, because the Black Tower was still in a state of serious damage, and was still far from recovering to its prime condition. Ling Han did not bother too much. After he had the divine demon sword swallow all the godly metal, he went to grieve for the Purple Moon Divine Maiden. However, what pleasantly surprised him was the fact that the Purple Moon Divine Maiden actually had not died. As it turned out, the Purple Moon Divine Maiden had only sent out a sliver of her divine sense into the underground abyss at the time. Though that sliver of divine sense had been destroyed, causing her to suffer a certain injury, compared with the other Eternal River tier elites, she was much better off. Ling Han was not qualified to pay a visit to the Purple Moon Divine Maiden. After he found out the news, he laughed long and loud, and began to make his way back to the great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire. After breaking through to the Heavenly Body tier, Ling Han's speed was naturally even faster than before. Furthermore, the ability to fly allowed him to ignore all obstacles posed by the terrain, which was more suitable for a long journey. After a mere 10 days later, he had arrived at the mountain entrance of the Heaven's Sword Palace. He chose Heaven's Sword Palace as his first stop because his disciple, Jiang Yefeng, was here. The Heaven's Sword Palace was a city, in fact. This city was called Heaven's Sword City. The Heaven's Sword Palace occupied 2/3 of the area of the whole city, and the remaining third was occupied by subsidiary establishments of the Heaven's Sword Palace like various restaurants and inns, as well as those people who made a living in these places. The Heaven's Sword City was huge. Even though the Heaven's Sword Palace was only a Sun-Moon tier-level force, the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire was really much too big. Even Sun-Moon tier-level forces could occupy a considerably large territory, and there was not much distance between the 5 great sects, either. Their territories were connected with each other and bordered on one another. Ling Han did not rush. He walked all on his own, and soon arrived at the main doors of the Heaven's Sword Palace. Though he called them the main doors, it was actually merely an arc-shaped ring. There was no actual doorway or doors, which made it appear very imposing. However, the absence of doors did not mean just anyone could go in. There were 8 disciples standing at the main entrance on guard duty, and each of them held a weapon. They all stood ramrod straight with puffed-up chests, using a disdainful gaze to sweep over the people walking to and fro, and appearing to be very aloof and remote. In the Heaven's Sword City, the Heaven's Sword Palace was the most supreme immortals. These 8 people were all in the Shattering Void tier, and in a small world, this was practically a deployment that could scare one to death. Powerful Shattering Void tier elites were actually degraded to acting as guards? But in the immortal realm, this was too ordinary. In fact, this even showed how poverty-stricken this place was. For example, the private guards of Empress Luanxing were all in the Mountain River tier, and the chief guard was even a Heavenly Body tier elite. Ling Han curbed his aura and did not expose his identity and killing intent at first. He wanted to see how much Zhang Yefeng had changed, and whether it was necessary to break the latter's cultivation. When they saw Ling Han approach, the 8 disciples all simultaneously shouted, "Halt!" However, though Ling Han had restrained the majority of his aura, as a powerful Heavenly Body tier elite, it would be incredibly frightening even if he just leaked out the slightest bit of his aura. Hence, these 8 disciples dared not be rash, or they would have long since drawn their weapons against Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "I want to see Zhang Yefeng." "You know Founder Zhang, sir?" one disciple asked. He seemed to be the leader of the 8 people. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then said, "I can be considered an old friend?" The 8 disciples immediately appeared reverent. Zhang Yefeng was the genius of the Heaven's Sword Palace. Though he had come from a small world, he had only used less than 10,000 years to advance into the Sun-Moon tier, and became a pillar of support for the Heaven's Sword Sect. This was a story of legend and inspiration, encouraging every disciple to work hard and attempt to become the second Zhang Yefeng. Thus, when Ling Han said he was Zhang Yefeng's old friend, these disciples naturally looked respectful. "May I ask how we should address you so we can inform Founder Zhang, sir?" the disciple in the lead asked. "Han Lin," Ling Han answered, smiling. "Please wait momentarily, sir." That disciple told the remaining 7 disciples to receive Ling Han well, while he himself turned around and quickly walked into the palace. If this allowed him to gain Founder Zhang's favor, so the latter could guide him a bit on his cultivation technique, then wouldn't that be a colossal fated opportunity for him? He scrambled off, the 7 people left behind all looking enviously at him. After a long while, that disciple was seen coming back from the distance, and there was a young girl dressed in red by his side. She was very beautiful, with a snow-white complexion, her long, black hair cascading down her shoulders, and her large eyes filled with mischief. The 2 very soon came near enough, and that disciple hadn't even begun to say anything when the young girl in red circled around Ling Han, sizing him up, and then asked, "I heard. You are my father's old friend?" This was Zhang Yefeng's daughter. Ling Han smiled. Going by that theory, this girl could be considered his grand disciple. His son wasn't even as old as this girl, and he had actually become a grandmaster, which was quite odd. He calmly said, "That's right. But why have I never heard father say that he has an old friend by the surname of Han?" The young girl crossed her arms behind her back and circled to stand behind Ling Han. Then, she suddenly stuck out her head. "Are you lying and actually do not know my father?" Ling Han thought for a moment, then suddenly folded his hands and displayed a palm technique. This was something that he had once taught his 4 disciples. He had obtained it from within an ancient site. It had been a very arduous process, so the master and his 4 disciples had spent great amounts of effort and time to memorize this palm technique, and it was probable that only the 5 of them knew this technique in the whole world. Though this could not be considered any powerful martial arts technique in the immortal realm, if Zhang Yefeng had still thought of him as a master, he would definitely have passed this on to his daughter. This had already surpassed the range of a martial arts technicite, was rather a form of reminiscence. How do you know cold wind palm? The young girl dressed in red was very shocked. Chapter 1341. 1341 Uncle, are you very good at fighting? 1341 Uncle, are you very good at fighting? Ling Han smiled slightly and asked, Is this enough to prove that your father and I know each other? The young girl in red was mischievous and circled around Ling Han one more time, and then asked, Where are you from, and why are you looking for father? Is it because you can no longer carry on where you are originally from? If that's what you think, Ling Han was naturally not going to drop down to the level of his grand disciple. He was still feeling rueful. Whichever angle he looked at it from, his young and handsome self wasn't at all reminiscent of a patriarch. Do you dislike talking? The young girl was unwilling to let him off. How do you know my father? Hee. Ling Han merely smiled and did not answer. He realized that this girl was a little bit of a pest. Come with me. The girl blinked her eyes, and mischief flashed through her gaze. Ling Han saw this, yet was completely uncaring. At present, his abilities were enough to suppress the entire Heaven's Sword Palace, and in the face of absolute sword intent, no matter how many tricks this girl played, it would be meaningless. The girl turned around and led the way, whilst Ling Han followed behind. I say, Uncle, are you any good at fighting? The young girl asked with slight anticipation. I should be quite capable. Ling Han did not pretend to be modest, as that was indeed the truth. Hee, you were the one who said it. A mischievous smile flashed over the young girl's face as she led Ling Han to stand in front of a courtyard. She obviously did not have any good intentions, as she immediately shot out a foot in a kick. Bang! The 2 big doors were forcibly kicked open by her foot. Obviously, the quarters of disciples of the Heaven's Sword Palace were not protected by a formation. Otherwise, even if she had been in the Mountain River tier, it would not have been easy to kick the doors open, either. Ling Han knew that this young girl was planning to use him as cannon fodder. He did not take it to heart, though. In the first place, the reason why he had come to the Heaven's Sword Palace was to cause great trouble and disband this sect. There was nothing wrong with starting from this step. Furthermore, if he made enough of a commotion, Zhang Yefeng naturally would appear as well. Zhang Xiaoling, it's you again. An angry shout was heard from inside the courtyard, and 7 people practically rushed out at the same time, all of them looking fierce and demonic. Zhang Xiaoling was naturally the name of the girl in red, Zhang Yefeng's daughter. She pretended to be stunned, and immediately dodged to hide behind Ling Han. Then, she stuck out her head and said, Do you all want to bully me? Humph, this is my uncle, and he's extremely good at fighting. Ha ha ha. When the 7 people looked at Ling Han, they all laughed loudly, appearing to be completely disdainful and uncaring. Ling Han had curbed his aura, and from mere appearances, he looked extremely ordinary. If one were to say he looked handsome, what use was that to 7 men? Moreover, he was not the type that was earth-shatteringly handsome, either. Zhang Yefeng, on the other hand, was a top-grade beauty, or he would not have managed to steal the heart of a noble daughter of the Heaven's Sword Palace, either. Uncle, look, these people are looking down on you. Didn't you say you were quite good at fighting? Teach them a lesson. Zhang Xiaoling fanned the fires of both sides and called Ling Han uncle without the slightest care. One of the 7 people, a man wearing a red headscarf, said, Zhang Xiaoling, young Master Ling really likes you. Furthermore, the 2 of you are well matched. One is the descendant of great ancestor Yang, whereas the other is the descendant of great ancestor Ling. So the 2 of you are definitely a match made in heaven. Please, Ling Yefeng is who knows how many years older than me. Previously, He liked my mother and wanted to marry her, and now he likes and wants to marry me. Yo, just the mere thought of it gives me goosebumps. So disgusting. Zhang Xiaoling crossed her arms over her chest, looking incredibly disgusted. Even if I have to marry someone, I would rather marry this uncle. She still did not forget to pull some hostility over to Ling Han. It was definitely deliberate. And who are you? The red headscarf asked Ling Han. My surname is An, and my name is Ye, Ling Han said carelessly. When he said this, Zhang Xiaoling suddenly spluttered in laughter. She covered her mouth with one hand and was shaking with laughter. The red headscarf's brain was not as fast as Zhang Xiaoling's. He mumbled an "Ie" a few times before he heard the person next to him point out, Brother Bao, he's taking advantage of you and calling himself your grandfather. Fuck. The red headscarf immediately jumped up and glared at Ling Han. Are you tired of living already? You even dare to take advantage of me. Oh, are you very strong? Ling Han asked calmly. Not strong. Not strong in the slightest. Zhang Xiaoling hurriedly said. He is just a dog of Ling Yefeng, in the medium extreme of the mountain river tier, right, uncle? You couldn't possibly be unable to defeat even this kind of trash, right? What if I can't? Ling Han asked, smiling. Then you'd be in big trouble because I have only just advanced into the mountain river tier and would not be able to save you at all. Zhang Xiaoling stuck out her tongue. You had better protect your face as much as possible. I trust they would not dare beat you to death. This, she indeed was Zhang Yefeng's daughter. The first thing she thought of in a fight was protecting her face. Speechless, Ling Han shook his head and said, I do not have the habit of being beaten. What a coincidence, neither do I. Looks like we're choir suited for each other. Zhang Xiaoling elbowed Ling Han. Humph, then I'll just choose your face to hit. The red headscarf took the initiative to step out, aiming a fist right at Ling Han's face. Ling Han's feet moved, and this fist immediately missed. Then, he lightly used his leg in a hooking motion, and the red headscarf immediately stumbled onto the ground. He had used strength very intelligently in this movement, making use of the force the red headscarf used in punching, transforming it into the force of his impact on the ground. With the heavy crash, the red headscarf landed solidly and dramatically on the ground. Brother Bao. The other 6 people hurriedly went to help the red headscarf up. It could be seen that this guy's whole face was covered in blood and dirt. As it turned out, he had actually broken his 2 front teeth on a hard rock when he had landed on the ground. Firstly, this was because the impact was too strong, and secondly, it was because he had not channeled any origin power to protect himself. Otherwise, he would not have been so miserable. Yo, you had your face smacked now. Zhang Xiaoling immediately started clapping, then turned to Ling Han and said, Uncle, you're so awesome. Ling Han shrugged and said, It has nothing to do with me. I didn't hit anyone. The red headscarf and his companions were in a rage. You called this having nothing to do with you? If you had not stretched out your leg to trip him, would the red headscarf end up like this? We attacked together. Humiliated, the red headscarf was in a rage, and with a wave of his hand, he took the lead to charge towards Ling Han. All 7 of them were fierce, and did not become wary of Ling Han due to how the red headscarf had eaten a loss just now. In their eyes, it was the red headscarf himself who had been too careless, and that was why Ling Han managed to trip him up, resulting in him breaking 2 of his front teeth. Zhang Xiaoling was very good at fanning the fires, and it was naturally impossible for her to involve herself in this. She quickly broke into a run, calling out, Uncle, go! Go! Shwa, shwa, shwa. Fists, palm strikes, sword chi, saber chi. There were some who used fists and palm strikes, and others used sabers or swords among the 7 people, and they attacked him from all sides. Ling Han crossed his arms behind his back, his feet moving, handling the 7 people's attacks with ease and skill. Not only that, he had even deliberately guided the 7 of them to attack one another through movements. Suddenly, the 7 shouted and quarreled, appearing incredibly chaotic. Together, MC is saying "Ni ye, ai." Your grandfather, which is equivalent to being hella full of himself while being disdainful of the addressee. Chapter 1342, 1342, Teaching Good Behavior. 1342, Teaching Good Behavior. The 7 mountain river tears attacked Ling Han furiously, but Ling Han caused chaos in the course of attacks of these 7 people merely through simple movements. They were endlessly attacking each other, and in this moment, the atmosphere was quite lively. Zhang Xiaoling couldn't help but be surprised. If one said that Ling Han had just been lucky, it could not have been that he would have been lucky so many times, but if one was saying that Ling Han was very strong, she was not one to believe that either. Firstly, there was not the slightest bit of the aura of an elite to feel from Ling Han, and secondly, if he was really an elite, why would he have to come here to rely on her father's help? But the truth of the matter was that the red headscarf and his companions were becoming more and more disorderly. Finally, they were punching and striking each other, and the worst victim had even been struck by a saber. Even his stomach had been split open. By now, they finally dared not make another move. Instead, they looked at Ling Han with incredible wariness, feeling that this young man was really too unusual. Done playing around? Ling Han asked with a beaming smile. When Zhang Xiaoling saw this, she immediately loudly exclaimed, "How could we be done playing? Of course we'll continue to play, and we're going to play a big game too." If she could use this chance to completely scare Ling Yefeng off, then she would be able to get more peace. The red headscarf and his companions hurriedly shook their heads, though. They did not want to continue to play. Couldn't it be seen that they were all now battered and bruised by now? Moreover, the one worst off could even see his intestines spilling out of his stomach. "Quick, go get reinforcements." The red headscarf delivered a kick to the person next to him. Yes. The man hurriedly nodded and ran off like the wind. "If you have the guts, don't run," the red headscarf said. He was afraid that Ling Han would run. Then, even if they managed to get reinforcements, they wouldn't be able to do anything to Ling Han either. After all, the faction of Great Ancestor Yang was also very strong. "Of course we're not running. What do we have to fear?" Zhang Xiaoling placed her hands at her hips. "Go and call Ling Yefeng over, and we'll see how my uncle will teach him good behavior." Ling Han simply chose to remain silent, allowing Zhang Xiaoling to be his spokesperson. After a while, the reinforcements came. These were 3 people in the consummate level of the mountain river tier, exuding a powerful aura. Senior Brother Liu, Senior Brother Zhao, Senior Brother Ma. The red headscarf was overjoyed at their unexpected arrival and hurriedly greeted the 3 newcomers. "It's this brat that actually dared to disrespect young Master Ling." "Oh." Senior Brother Liu took a few steps forward, swept an eye over Ling Han, and involuntarily revealed an expression of disdain. He gave a humph and said, "You can't even deal with this kind of person and still need the 3 of us to move?" His eyes looked over the bruises and wounds on the red headscarf and his companions, and his expression became even more displeased. Every sect would definitely be divided into several factions. For instance, they all belonged to the Ling faction, whereas Ling Han and Zhang Xiaoling were obviously from the Yang faction. Now, the people of the Ling faction had actually been beaten by people from the Yang faction, so they would naturally feel embarrassed. "Senior Brother Liu," the red headscarf said weakly. He also felt quite aggrieved. It was obvious that Ling Han was really not that strong, but just by moving his feet, he had caused them to be in complete chaos. He felt ashamed just by talking about it. Senior Brother Liu waved him off and stopped the red headscarf from saying whatever he was going to say. No matter how it was, since people of the Ling faction had been beaten, he was naturally not just going to sit by and watch. "You kneel down." He pointed at Ling Han, giving out pressure that came from one used to a lofty position. "I'll give you a chance. As long as you kneel for 3 days and nights, I will spare you this once." "Lu Dongdong, why are you acting so proud? Do you think that you are so very awesome?" Zhang Xiaoling could not stop herself from fanning the fires again. "Uncle, you don't have to mind me. Beat them. Beat him until even his own mother wouldn't be able to recognize him." "My name is Lu Dongming," Senior Brother Liu called out loudly, a vein popping on his forehead. Don't you think that Lu Dongdong sounds nicer? Zhang Xiaoling's whole expression was completely innocent and naive, but whoever believed that she was really so innocent would definitely be fooled dizzy. Damn it! Lu Dongming couldn't help but make a move and snatched at Zhang Xiaoling. Zhang Xiaoling was very agile. Since she had deliberately fanned the fires, how could she have been unguarded? She stayed beside Ling Han all this while, and the moment Lu Dongming made his move, she immediately ducked behind Ling Han, completely making Ling Han into her human shield. Out of the way! Lu Dongming shouted loudly. Ling Han did not answer, but neither did he move out of the way. To Lu Dongming, this was naturally seen as a challenge, and he pressed down his palm towards him. For mountain rivers appeared around him and formed a frightening pressure. The release of the mountain rivers would boost destructive power. Ling Han moved one step to the side, and then very casually sent out a palm strike of his own. However, whether it was in terms of timing or power, it was controlled strictly. There was obviously not much power, but Lu Dongming involuntarily charged forwards, and with a bang, also fell pathetically onto the ground. The red headscarf almost laughed out loud. Just now, you had even called me trash, but didn't you end up just like I had? But they were still on the same side, after all, so he couldn't possibly favor an outsider instead of his own side. Zhang Xiaoling did not have such qualms, and erupted into laughter. She even began applauding, and said, "Uncle, you're great. Now I believe that you are my father's friend because you are as treacherous as my father." Would anyone give their father such an assessment? Ling Han couldn't help but shake his head. Furthermore, there was absolutely no similarity in personality that he shared with Zhang Yefeng. Lu Dongming got back up and looked at Ling Han with shock and suspicion. He couldn't understand. Ling Han had obviously not used much power in that strike, and he hadn't moved very fast either, so why had he involuntarily fallen to the ground from such a light strike? He put himself in Ling Han's shoes, but no matter how hard he thought about it, he did not think that he could do it himself. It was precisely because this confusion that caused him not to dare to make another move. His thinking was correct. No mountain river tier could possibly deliver a heavy strike so lightly like how Ling Han had done so previously. That was because Ling Han had not used brute force. Instead, he had used the power of regulations of a higher level, and that was why he could easily pummel a mountain river tier while not showing any obvious power. "Quick, go get reinforcements," Lu Dongming said to the red headscarf. The red headscarf involuntarily broke out in a cold sweat. Why did these words sound so familiar? Weren't they the exact words he had said to his lackey just now? Now the speaker was another person, but there was no change to his lines. He hurriedly turned around and ran, going off to look for someone even stronger. If even consummate level was not an equal match, then he could only bring a senior of the Sun-Moon tier. "How should I address you, sir?" Lu Dongming asked darkly. Ling Han waved his hand dismissively and said, "You are still not qualified to find out." Lu Dongming almost exploded in fury. He was just a step away from becoming a higher-level elite by reaching the Sun-Moon tier, yet had actually been waved off and reprimanded by another so dismissively as if he was just any ordinary person. How could he take that? Wait until the elites of the Ling faction come, and we'll see if you won't be suppressed like a dog. After a while, a middle-aged man walked quickly over, the red headscarf following behind him. There was a red sun above the head of this middle-aged man, his attitude disdainful, seeming extremely arrogant. In the Heaven Sword Palace, the Sun-Moon tier was an undisputed elite, so it was normal for him to be arrogant. This man's surname was Cheng, with the name of Yuan, and he belonged to the faction of the Ling clan. Who was the fuck? At first, Cheng Yuan had been completely relaxed, but when his eyes caught sight of Ling Han, he couldn't help but call out loudly in spite of himself. Why was this bringer of misfortune here? Chapter 1343, 1343 The bringer of misfortune is here. 1343 The bringer of misfortune is here. The lower-level disciples of the Heaven Sword Palace might not know who Ling Han was, but among the higher-ups, he was definitely notorious and known to all. the main culprit that had brought the lower realm into the immortal realm through opening the sky. A freak that had advanced to the sun-moon tier in a mere 10 years' time, and a great enemy that possessed the ability to threaten the existence of the 5 sects. Now, this powerful enemy had actually come quietly to the Heaven's Sword Palace. Gasp! Chung Yuan's hair was standing on ends due to his intense anxiety. His aura had also become extremely unstable. Pong! The red headscarf immediately became unlucky, was instantly sent flying by the force of his aura alone. His face landed on the ground first, and he immediately broke several more teeth, which caused him much depression. What kind of bad luck was he in? Ling Han! Chung Yuan called out in spite of himself. His voice was extremely shrill, and it was sharp enough that practically no one could tell that this kind of voice had come from a man's mouth. Ling Han? The other disciples were all baffled. Could it be that Uncle Chung Yuan knew this young man? Hold on, Ling? Could he be a descendant of great ancestor Ling? But then why was he with the people from the Yang clan? Could it be that he was the black sheep of the Ling clan? Chung Yuan did not say another word. Immediately, he threw up his hand, and a firework immediately bloomed in the skies. This was no ordinary firework, but rather the alert signal unique to the Heaven's Sword Palace. As the fireworks danced, a shock wave swept out in all directions, instantly enshrouding the whole Heaven's Sword City. It even radiated to several thousand miles away, transmitted to the other 4 sections. The expressions of the red headscarf and the others all changed swiftly. Among the alert signals of the Heaven's Sword Palace, there was a total of 5 colors: crimson, red, green, blue, and purple, with the purple warning indicating the lowest level of danger, while crimson would mean that it was a matter that concerned the continuing existence of the sect. The worst they had seen was the green-colored signal, and the red signal had never been used before, what more the crimson one. Chung Yuan releasing the purple warning signal was obviously because of Ling Han, yet could such an ordinary-looking young man really be such a huge threat that he could threaten the survival of the Heaven's Sword Palace? Shio. It was in that short instant that several dozen figures flew over, and the number was still increasing. The 5 sects were more fortunate. When the troops of the Netherworld retreated, the majority of their members had also returned to their respective sections. All the elites of the Sun-Moon tier dared not leave, keeping their guard at all times against the possibility of Ling Han's arrival. Thus, they had avoided the calamity in this manner. Now that they saw the crimson signal, the elites naturally would immediately arrive. Ling Han. It's that brat. Damn it, he actually really dared to come. Quick, activate the Great Protective Formation, then bring out the ancestral weapon to kill this brat. A whole group of people were making a ruckus, and they were all the mighty figures in the eyes of these disciples. Even if a mountain collapsed in front of them, they would usually not twitch an eyebrow, yet all of them were extremely anxious now, and there was no difference between them and ordinary people. This caused the red headscarf and the others to feel astonished. Who exactly was this person in front of them? Could it be that he was a bringer of misfortune? An old man appeared and solemnly called out to Zhang Qiaoling, "Qiaoer, come back." This was the leader of the Yang faction. His name was Yang Jin, and he was also Zhang Qiaoling's maternal great-great-great-grandfather. When he saw his own descendant was standing next to a bringer of misfortune like Ling Han, his heart instantly shuddered. He thought that this girl was really outrageously bold. Zhang Qiaoling was involuntarily shocked. This old friend of her father was a little too awesome, wasn't he? He had actually caused so many elites of the sect to mobilize. Had this ever happened before? At least, as far as she knew, the answer was no. Though she was usually mischievous and very headstrong, with Yang Jin being so strict, she did not dare defy his command. Immediately, she walked over to Yang Jin, but couldn't help from turning her head around to look. No matter how she looked at him, she only thought that Ling Han had delicate features and did not look anything like a very violent, dangerous character. Not until Zhang Qiaoling had come to his side did Yang Qin breathe a sigh of relief. He thought that though Ling Han was extremely evil, he was still quite straightforward and upright in his ways, at least, and was not in the habit of using a weaker person as a hostage. Ling Han, you are really outrageously bold. You even dare to barge into the Heaven's Sword Palace. Are you not afraid that you will die here? An old man asked menacingly. He was the leader of the Ling faction, Ling Kongqing. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "Go and call Jiang Yefeng over. I have questions to ask him." "Humph, you're here in our sect, and you still want to issue orders?" Yang Jin humphed. At this moment, the Great Protective Formation had already been activated, and the ancestral weapon of the Heaven's Sword Palace had also been brought out. With a flash, it flew out from a certain corner of the city and was aloft in the skies, exuding a frightening might. This Great Protective Formation had been strengthened through who knew how many years, and so had the ancestral weapon. Any one of them would be able to match a cultivator in the middle stage of the Sun-Moon tier, or even peak stage, and if the two were used together, they also had the ability to strengthen each other and boost the might to a higher level. They could even stand against the peak stage of the Sun-Moon tier. That also meant that when the Heaven's Sword Palace started a war, it was equivalent to them having an elite of the Heavenly Body tier, though it was only one in the early stage of low extreme. But how astonishing was it to cross the gap from the Sun-Moon tier to Heavenly Body tier. Now that the two deadly weapons were out, those of the Heaven's Sword Palace were finally calm and unhurried. Now, Ling Han only had two options to choose from. He could either fight or flee, but whether he chose to fight or flee, the result would not change. Was destined to die in this place. He had really delivered himself right into a trap? Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "I have seen one of you years ago when I was still in the lower realm, and now, 20 years later, I can finally see the true faces of you animals. I am truly feeling rueful at this moment." "How dare you?" another old man rebuked. For suns and moons appeared behind him, exuding a slight aura and causing the air around him to immediately begin burning. The others all looked furious as well. He had come to the Heaven's Sword Palace, and he still dared to insult them as animals. He was really being too arrogant. Could it be that he didn't know that he was currently trapped in an ultimate killing formation, and there was also an ancestral weapon above him that was aimed right at him? Meanwhile, Zhang Qiaoling bore an expression of admiration. Whether Ling Han was friend or enemy, he deserved to be admired just for his air of majesty. However, why was this man also named Ling Han? It had to be known that her father's master was called this name as well. Ling Han had also said that he was an old friend of her father, so it was definitely impossible that he shared the same name as the founder. Could it be? A theory came up in her mind, but she quickly shook her head. That was too much of an exaggeration. How could this brat possibly be her father's master? If that was really the case, if the fact that she had called him uncle all this while came to be known to her old man, he would definitely beat her pert bottom black and blue. Wasn't that deceiving his master and eliminating her ancestor? Activate the killing formation to kill this brat, Yang Jin commanded darkly. All right, I will take charge of the ancestral weapon, Ling Kongqing said. Though he and Yang Jin had competed with each other over the majority of their lives, in front of a shared enemy, they were standing on the same side. Internal strife was internal strife, and they were fighting over power within the sect, but if they could not unite against an outsider and the Heaven's Sword Palace was finished, what chance would they have for internal strife? 8 Spiritual Divine Ghost. Yang Jin tapped his own forehead and Wang. The formation that enshrouded the whole Heaven's Sword City was immediately activated. A colossal black-colored human-shaped monster appeared. It was about 300 meters tall, its hand wielding a short staff. The moment it appeared, it was exuding an extremely fearful and evil aura, and even the heaven and earth paled in color. What an evil entity! Chapter 1344, Stepping Forward Bravely to Protect Master. Chapter 1344, Stepping Forward Bravely to Protect Master. The formation moved, forming an evil spirit as tall as 300 meters, its malicious aura soaring sky-high. Destiny Sword. Ling Kongqing meanwhile drove the ancestral weapon to slash down at Ling Han. Shua, in the skies, the ancestral weapon shone and became 30,000 meters long. It slashed down with a sword light, extremely brilliant and blinding. All the members of the Heaven's Sword Palace were smirking coldly. The ancestral weapon and the Great Protective Formation showed their might at the same time, boosting each other's power. That might would be able to match the peak stage of the Sun-Moon tier, which could practically be considered another type of the heavenly body tier, which would be enough to crush any Sun-Moon tier. This brat might be freakish, but he was too arrogant. He actually dared charge boldly into their ancestral grounds. Wasn't that practically courting his own death? Sword Light and the evil spirit attacked at the same time, exuding a frightening aura. Ling Han's feet moved, and he easily dodged all the attacks. He had even drawn the attacks towards where the people of the Heaven's Sword Sect were, causing both Ling Kongqing and Yang Jin to break out in a cold sweat. They were the controllers of the ancestral weapon and formation, and it would naturally take a lot of their concentration and effort to control these two objects that had such powerful and frightening might. Boom, boom, boom. One attack landed after another, and a massive commotion rang out in the city, causing those mortals who did not know the truth to be greatly puzzled. What was going on with the Heaven's Sword Palace? In their memories, the Heaven's Sword City had never experienced being invaded by an outside force. However, there were also more and more elites of the Heaven's Sword Palace gathering. As long as they had reached the Sun-Moon tier, they all raced over here. Mountain River tiers could only watch the battle from afar, whereas those below Immortal level had temporarily left the Heaven's Sword Palace to avoid being impacted by the shock waves from the battle. That would lead to definite death. A beautiful woman appeared and called out anxiously to Jiang Qiaoling, "Shower." Beside her was a handsome man. He had a little badness in his handsomeness, yet one would still be enchanted by his charisma. Zhang Yefeng. Ling Han recognized him with a single glance. This flashy disciple of his was still as dashingly handsome as he had been. That kind of charm that had a little bit of badness in it was something that would most easily attract women. Read more chapter on novel full. Father, mother. Jiang Qiaoling hurriedly raced over and threw herself into the beautiful woman's arms. The latter was a noble daughter of the Heaven's Sword Palace, and her name was Chandi. Chandi quickly embraced her daughter with deep concern as she asked, "Shower, are you injured?" When she knew that her daughter was together with a bringer of misfortune like Ling Han, she almost fainted in her anxiety. Meanwhile, Zhang Yefeng frowned. He was looking at Ling Han, his eyes confused. This man was actually called Ling Han as well, and had come from the lower realm, causing a very huge wave to rise up in his heart. "Father, this uncle says he's your old friend, and he knows the cold wind palm." Jiang Qiaoling spoke fast and blurted out everything in a single instant. "What?" Zhang Yefeng was instantly stirred up. Only his master and fellow disciples knew the cold wind palm, and this man was also named Ling Han and had come from the lower realm. These three important facts added together caused him to come up with a very bold deduction. He took a few steps forwards and loudly asked, "Sir, who was the one who taught you the cold wind palm?" Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "I learned it on my own, but as for yours, I was the one who taught you." Jiang Yefeng received a shock, yet he shook his head repeatedly and said, "Impossible! Impossible! My master has passed away. Don't think that you can impersonate him." "Is that right?" Ling Han smiled and casually spoke of some events that had happened when he had taken Jiang Yefeng as disciple. Though those were all unremarkable small matters, they were also only known to only Ling Han and Jiang Yefeng. Not even his other three disciples knew of them. "My master!" Jiang Yefeng instantly knelt down, tears streaming down his cheeks. Meanwhile, Jiang Qiaoling had paled. She had indeed not guessed wrongly this was really that Ling Han, and she actually used her father's master like a shield, and had called him an uncle all this while. If her father found out, he would definitely beat her bottom black and blue. And Chun Jin and Ling Kongqing were both stunned. They naturally knew some information about Zhang Yefeng. He was a prodigious disciple, after all. However, Zhang Yefeng had been brought to the immortal realm 10,000 years ago, and Ling Han had come through opening the sky only 20 years ago. How could the timing match? Time source fluid. They immediately had this thought in their hearts. This was a divine item that could seal off vitality and allow one to pass thousands of years. Unfortunately, it was only effective for those below immortal level. However, if that was not the case, they would not be qualified to obtain this object even with their abilities. So he is a remaining evil element. Chun Jin smirked coldly. We did not find you and kill you 10,000 years ago, leaving a great danger for us at present. Kill. Ling Kongqing's eyes were cold as well. More and more elites were arriving and collectively controlling the ancestral weapon and formation. Not only did this take off a lot of pressure from the two of them, it also increased the might of the ancestral weapon and formation greatly. Evil Spirit Serval Sword. Ling Kongqing roared loudly. That evil spirit actually gripped the divine sword from the skies and ruthlessly slashed down on Ling Han. This was the perfect merging of the ancestral weapon and the great protective formation, which could boost their might to the true apex. It was so close to the apex that it was equivalent to the early stage of the low extreme of the heavenly body tier. Stop! Zhang Yifeng stepped out bravely, not caring for how weak he was, and stood in front of Ling Han. He stretched out his arms, exhibiting the courage that said, "If you want to kill my master, you have to kill me first." Yefeng. Chun Di hurriedly stepped out as well, also regardless of the danger she would face. Father, mother. Zhang Xiaoling did not hesitate as well, and jumped out too. Damn it! Chun Jin roared in fury, and hurriedly pointed a finger at that evil spirit. The might of the sword slash delivered by the evil spirit was immediately forced to one side, missing Ling Han, and landed on the ground 9 meters beside him, giving rise to dust and sand that filled the air. A crack appeared in the ground, spreading out in all directions like a spider's web. This was equivalent to the attack of a heavenly body tier. Its destructive ability was too powerful. Even if there was a great protective formation here, it was useless. Chen Di, shower, come back quickly, Chen Di called out harshly. Though Zhang Yifeng was also his great-great-great-grandson-in-law, since he was not of their lineage, he could be punished and killed. He was already filled with the intent to kill him. No. Chun Di shook her head and begged, Ancestor, please don't hurt Yifeng. Don't harm my parents. Zhang Xiaoling also stretched out her arms, acting aggressive and overbearing. Shower, Chen Di, the two of you go back. Zhang Yifeng commanded seriously. He could not possibly stand by and watch as his master was ganged up on and killed, but he similarly was unwilling to see his wife and daughter implicated in this matter as well. Yifeng, Chen Di wept, only shaking her head continuously. Zhang Yifeng felt like his heart was being cut apart, yet his expression was cold. He had no regrets, even if he would die. Without Ling Han, he would have long since died. Yet Ling Han smiled and said, Yifeng, you have gotten yourself a good spouse. Zhang Yifeng smiled bitterly. Things had already reached this point, yet his master was still so composed. This ability to keep himself calm was something he admired, but it did not change the present situation in the slightest. Old Chun, sorry. Ling Kongqing humphed, and began to control the evil spirit again to slash out at Ling Han. Not only would this strike hit Ling Han, even Zhang Yifeng and the others would not be able to escape. In the face of the survival of the sect, what was kinship worth? Chun Jin sighed, but closed his eyes. Boom! The divine sword descended. Chun Jin was previously named Yang Jin, but for some reason, the author has switched his surname to Chen. Chapter 1345. This impressive? Chapter 1345. This impressive? The divine sword slashed down. This was a heavenly body tier attack, so it was incredibly powerful and frightening. Ling Han casually waved his hand. There was clearly no energy fluctuation, yet the might of the sword slash gradually became weaker and weaker. In the end, it became as light and weak as a gentle breeze. The Tide of the Ages. This wasn't the damaged bloodline technique that had been retrieved from Ding Zizhen, but rather the true and complete celestial technique that had been retrieved from Ding Ling's memory. Ling Han had spent over 2,000 years to advance to the heavenly body tier, and he had also used this time to fully grasp the Tide of the Ages. When he waved his hand, he clearly hadn't created any energy fluctuations. However, he had still managed to instantly age the sword slash and completely diminish its power. Meanwhile, Zhang Yefeng naturally wouldn't accept death without any resistance. He was already prepared for this, and he instantly threw a punch at the sword. Pong! The divine sword was instantly sent flying hundreds of meters into the sky. At the same time, the evil spirit was also sent stumbling back, almost collapsing to the ground. What? What in the world is going on? The members of the Heaven's Sword Palace were all stunned, and Zhang Yefeng himself was also confused. He scratched his head in confusion. Since when had he become so strong? Yefeng! Chan Di cried tears of happiness as she hugged her husband from behind. She had initially thought that this slash would take her lover away from her forever. However, her husband had unexpectedly unleashed a devastating might and battered the divine sword away. This caused joy and delight to flash across her eyes. "Dad, you're so powerful." Zhang Xiaoling also yelped in astonishment. Who didn't understand the powerful nature of this sect protection formation and divine sword? This being the case, was Zhang Yefeng a heavenly body tier elite? There was respect and fear in everyone's eyes as they looked at Zhang Yefeng. To the Heaven's Sword Palace, heavenly body tier elites were no different from Genesis tier saints. Cultivators at these tiers were all immensely powerful and invincible beings. Read more chapter on novel full. However, Chen Jin and the others didn't believe this. Zhang Yefeng's aura was clearly still at the Sun-Moon tier. Moreover, it was only at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. If they were unable to determine even this, then they could all buy a block of tofu and smack themselves to death. So, how was the evil spirit's attack blocked? Was it Ling Han? This couldn't be. Although he had indeed waved his hand, there hadn't been any origin power fluctuation at all. So, how could he have possibly dissolved the heavenly body tier attack? Not to mention that Ling Han was only at the Sun-Moon tier. Even if he were at the heavenly body tier, such a feat would have still been impossible. Regardless of how powerful one was, they would still need to release their power if they were to block a strike. Of course, this conclusion was simply the result of their ignorance and lack of knowledge. Regulations were also a part of battle prowess. Moreover, as long as the regulations that one grasped were powerful enough, one could easily unleash a devastating might without needing to use any other power. Again, Ling Kongsheng roared. A dozen or so people instantly started to manipulate the formation and the god tool again. The evil spirit steadied itself and launched another sword strike at Zhang Yefeng. Boom! A heavenly body tier pressure radiated from the sword, and it was as if even heaven and earth were about to shatter and collapse. Zhang Yefeng gritted his teeth and replied with another punch. This was an act of desperation as there was simply nothing else he could do. Ling Han chuckled in his mind. He casually waved his hand and unleashed the tide of the ages again. The evil spirit's sword slash arrived before Zhang Yefeng, yet it was as gentle and soft as a spring breeze. Pong! Zhang Yefeng's fist collided with the divine sword, and it was like a raging dragon out of the sea as it pummeled the sword back once again. His power continued to travel through the divine sword and into the evil spirit's body, lifting it up and throwing it back through the air. The evil spirit collapsed the ground with a heavy thud. Gasp! Everyone was stunned by this exchange. Once could be a coincidence, but twice. There couldn't be so many coincidences in the world. If there were, then it wouldn't be a coincidence anymore. It would be an expected occurrence. Zhang Yefeng, he could battle against heavenly body tier elites. This was incredible. One had to realize that he was only at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, yet he was actually able to battle against this evil spirit that was at the low extreme of the heavenly body tier. Not only this, but he was even able to enjoy a huge advantage. Just how impressive was this? Prodigy. No, a supreme prodigy. Not adding the two extra supremes in front would be failing to do justice to his tremendous prodigiousness. 5-star geniuses? Heh, could they compare to Zhang Yefeng? His battle prowess had surpassed an entire major tier. It was a whopping 16 stars. Even Zhang Yefeng started to question his own power. Had he woken up on the wrong side of bed and taken the wrong medication? How was he so powerful? Yefeng, although this person is your master, The relationship between you two merely spanned several hundred years. However, the sect has treated you generously and nurtured you for over 10,000 years. Moreover, you've already married a disciple of our Heaven's Sword sect. Is this not reason enough for you to support us? Ling Kongqing immediately asked. In the beginning, they had merely viewed Jiang Yefeng as a traitor. Now, however, this traitor had displayed heaven-defying power. Thus, they naturally had to change their attitude. This kind of freakish prodigy was far too important to the Heaven's Sword sect. Not only could he push the Heaven's Sword sect to the leader's position of the 5 sects, but he could even help them conquer more territory. However, regardless of how gaudy and self-confident Jiang Yefeng was, he was still extremely clear about his own strength. Battling against this evil spirit definitely wasn't something that he could do. Thus, he turned to look at Ling Han, asking, "Master, what do you say? The 5 sects have continued to refine realm pills for so long, and this is a crime that can't be forgiven. They must be eliminated from existence. Otherwise, how can the generation upon generation of victims rest in peace?" Ling Han said calmly. "This disciple understands," Jiang Yefeng replied respectfully. "Detestable." Ling Kongqing glared at Ling Han and said, "Mister, your surname is also Ling, so perhaps we share a common ancestor. That being the case, is there any need to take things so far?" "Holy fuck, don't you feel shameless uttering such words?" Ling Han couldn't help but say, "Old geezer, you've really shown me the next level of shamelessness. Fine, I'm not a bloodthirsty person either, so why don't you disband the Heaven's Sword Palace from today onward? Those above the immortal level can all cripple their own cultivation. As for those who decided to refine the realm pills, they must die." Ling Kongqing's expression instantly became dark. Ling Han was simply taking things too far. After all, he was also a member of the higher-ups who had decided to refine the realm pills in the first place. Now, Ling Han wanted him to die, and he also wanted him to disband the Heaven's Sword Palace. Moreover, he even wanted those above the immortal level to cripple their own cultivation. You're fucking dreaming. If that's your decision, then the only option is to battle to the death. He abandoned all thoughts of resolving this peacefully. It was clear that Ling Han wasn't planning to spare them anyway. "Go!" he roared loudly, and the evil spirit swung the divine sword wildly as it lunged forward again. He refused to believe that Jiang Yefeng was truly so powerful. After confirming that Jiang Yefeng hadn't been dragged into the muddy waters by the Heaven's Sword Palace in these past 10,000 years, Ling Han naturally didn't need to hold back any longer. He strode forward and threw a punch at the evil spirit. This was an extremely simple punch. Pung! However, this punch was extremely domineering, and the power of the punch transformed into a ray of light that crashed into the evil spirit's chest. The devastating force of this strike instantly blasted the evil spirit into pieces. Meanwhile, the divine sword also spun in the air before being caught by Ling Han. It returned to its original size of 3 feet long. A violent glow immediately burst from the divine sword as it attempted to break free from Ling Han's grasp. Sword chi surged into the surroundings, unleashing an astonishing destructive power. "Humph!" Ling Han humphed softly and said, "Trying to resist?" His physique was far too terrifying. In fact, it was even a tad more powerful than level 10 godly metal. Meanwhile, this divine sword was only forged from level 8 godly metal, so how could it break free from his grasp? The sword shuddered violently and rang in grief as it was forcefully suppressed by Ling Han. Ling Han was ticked off by the divine sword, so he simply resorted to violent brute strength. Pa! The divine sword was forcefully snapped into 2. Holy fucking shit! Everyone gasped in shock upon seeing this. In fact, their eyes were almost about to pop out of their heads. Ling Han, he had snapped a god tool into 2 with his bare hands. Just what kind of freak was he? At this moment, everyone finally came to a realization. Sure enough, it wasn't Jiang Yefeng who was freakishly powerful. He was indeed just an ordinary cultivator at the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. The abnormal person was this powerful freak. Chapter 1346, Destroying the Heaven's Sword Palace. Chapter 1346, Destroying the Heaven's Sword Palace. Bitterness and terror instantly gripped at the hearts of the elites of the Heaven's Sword Palace. Their two most powerful defenses had been destroyed by Ling Han. The Sect protecting formation had been shattered by his punch, and the ancestral weapon had been brutally snapped into two. How could they continue to fight him? They could only wait for death to arrive. Zhang Qiaoling's eyes instantly lit up. This uncle. No, this Grandmaster was far too powerful. With his influence and protection, wouldn't she be able to do as she pleased in the future? This is your final chance. The main culprits must die, and the others might have a chance at survival, Ling Han said calmly. A heavenly body tier aura instantly radiated from his body. This was the suppression from a superior being. To say nothing of ordinary Sun-Moon tier cultivators, even those at the pinnacle level of the Sun-Moon tier would be easily suppressed by him. After all, Ling Han was a 6-star genius at this moment. Ling Kongqing glanced at Chen Jin, and as their eyes met, it was as if they had come to some instant understanding. Xiao. Ling Kongqing suddenly lunged forward, killing intent surging from his body. However, his target wasn't Ling Han. Instead, it was Chen Jin. This was far too sudden. Who could have predicted this? The old man placed a hand on Chen Jin's head and coldly said, Chen Di, if you want your ancestor to live, then immediately tell him to stop. This? Zhang Yefeng and Chen Di were both transfixed with shock and disbelief. This old geezer continued to lower the bar for his shamelessness. Dear, save me. Chen Jin was extremely cooperative, and tears streamed down his face as he looked at Chen Di with a pitiful expression. This was an absolute joke? Read more chapter on novel full. Ling Han's expression was cold, and he said, Enough. There's no need to continue this despicable act. Both of you are prime culprits, so there's already no way for you to escape death. Why can't you two die with some dignity? What's the worth of dignity? Is it edible? Ling Kongqing stared at Ling Han and shouted, Ling Han, this is the ancestor of your disciple's wife. Yet, you're just going to stand there and watch him die? Don't you feel any guilt or shame toward your disciple? Guilt your mom. Ling Han was truly irked at this moment, and he immediately extended his arm toward them. A deep frown appeared on Ling Kongqing's face. His threat still wasn't working? By the looks of it, he wasn't doing enough. He suddenly pressed down with his hand. Pa! Chun Jin's head instantly exploded. At the same time, a human-shaped light orb flew out from his crushed head. This was Chun Jin's divine sense. There was fury and astonishment on his face, and it was clear that he hadn't expected Ling Kongqing to truly kill him. However, before he could even open his mouth to berate Ling Kongqing, his divine sense had already been grabbed by him. Without a body, how could a mere divine sense be capable of defending itself against an elite at the same cultivation level? Don't force me to do this, Ling Kongqing shouted menacingly. Dumb C***. Ling Han was merciless as he lashed out with his palm. Pa! Ling Kongqing's body was instantly obliterated. He had no chance to carry through with his threat. His divine sense also flew out. After reaching the immortal level, one's divine sense would still be able to survive for a certain amount of time, even without the support of a physical body. This would give one enough time to possess another body. Right now, Ling Kongqing was also reduced to just his divine sense. However, he didn't charge over to battle against Chen Jin. Instead, the two of them suddenly started to flee in opposite directions. Without the support of a physical body, one's divine sense would become extremely fragile and weak. At the same time, however, the lack of a physical body would also give one's divine sense more agility and freedom. Not only were divine senses extremely quick, but they even possessed the ability to fly. They were going to flee, and if they possessed the bodies of even just ordinary people, they would be able to survive for several decades more. Whenever those bodies started to fail, they would simply leave and possess the bodies of some other people. You think you can escape? Ling Han snapped his fingers. Xiao. 2 arcs of lightning surged outward at an incredible speed. This was the power of heavenly tribulation that he had grasped. Just how quick was the divine lightning of the tribulation? Could anyone in the world outrun it? No. Ling Kongqing and Chen Jin naturally weren't exempt from this absolute rule, and it wasn't long before they were caught by the 2 arcs of lightning. There were 2 loud cracks as they were instantly fried into dust. Every single molecule of their being was blasted from existence. Ling Han strode around, his heavenly body tier aura enveloping the sect and causing all the members of the Heaven's Sword Palace to kneel down. No one dared to stand up against him. I'll give you people half a day's time. The prime culprits can kill themselves, and everyone in the immortal level can cripple their own cultivation. From today onward, the Heaven's Sword Palace will cease to exist. If anyone fails to do this, I'll personally hunt them down and kill them. Compared to how the 5 sects had refined the beings of an entire small world into realm pills, Ling Han's actions were actually incredibly benevolent. This was because he didn't enjoy bloodshed. "Let's go," Ling Han said to Zhang Yefeng. "Yes, master," Zhang Yefeng hurriedly replied. Ling Han walked out of the sect, and Zhang Yefeng obediently followed behind him. Meanwhile, Chen Di and Zhang Xiaoling were even further back as they followed behind Zhang Yefeng. They found some place in the city to sit down, where master and disciple started to exchange their stories. However, Zhang Yefeng's story was extremely simple. Although he had lived in the immortal realm for over 10,000 years, he had barely ever left his residence. The most significant thing he had done after Ling Han's disappearance was founding the Cold Spear Association in the lower realm. Traveling from the immortal realm to small worlds was extremely difficult, yet transmitting some non-living entities over was relatively simple. Thus, he was able to transmit his divine intent and found an association even through the barrier of the 2 realms. Half a day passed, and Ling Han returned to the Heaven's Sword Palace. Most of the prime culprits were already dead. This was mainly because they had descendants, and they didn't dare to test Ling Han's patience. However, there were also those who wanted to test their luck. Some fled by themselves, while others fled with their families and descendants. This time, Ling Han didn't hold back anymore. He was ruthless as he killed all of those who dared to disobey his command. Blood flowed, and a sanguinary smell permeated through the entire city. Only a single day had passed, yet the Heaven's Sword Palacia force once dominant in this region had already been wiped from the face of the world and swept into the long annals of history. However, Ling Han didn't continue to the 4 remaining sections. Instead, he went to find Yun Yongwang, Feng Piyun, and the others first. More people from the lower realm needed to witness the destruction of the 5 sects. Coincidentally, Chen Ruijing had also returned not long ago. Upon seeing Ling Han, he fell to his knees even though he was still very far away. He was overcome by emotion. Meanwhile, the old ginseng and rabbit had also arrived at this place. When they saw Ling Han, they both laughed and joked, saying that he didn't have the appearance of someone who would die young and that they'd known he would be able to make it through alive. However, Zhang Yefeng was received much more coldly. In the eyes of Chen Ruijing and the others, Zhang Yefeng was nothing but a traitor. He had actually joined the Heaven's Sword Palace. However, with mediation from Ling Han, as well as Zhang Xiaoling's cheekiness and persistence to call them uncle, the misunderstandings between them were finally cleared. After all, they had been brothers for many centuries, so how could the misunderstandings and hostility between them not be cleared? Following this, they visited the 4 remaining sections. The Cloud Phoenix Sect, Blue Thunder Sect, and Absolute Saber Sect were all razed to the ground. The prime culprits were killed, and the accessories to the crime were all forced to cripple their own cultivation. They wouldn't be able to commit any more crimes. Lastly, they visited the Earth Dragon Sect. The group of them charged to the foot of the mountain that the sect was built on. Because they had already dealt with the Cloud Phoenix Sect, the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden also came out from the Black Tower. Upon seeing her, Zhang Yefeng and Ling Han's 3 other disciples all called her Mrs. in unison. There was a hint of obsequiousness in their voices, and the respect that they showed her was dozens of times what they showed Ling Han. Ding Ping didn't know about their experiences, so he couldn't help but feel confused. Why were his 4 senior brothers so respectful to their master's wife? However, he did know that his master had several other wives who had been taken to the celestial realm. Thus, he quietly prayed for his master, wishing that master's family could live happily and in harmony. Anyhow, the Earth Dragon sect was built amid the marshlands. Most of the disciples of this sect possessed the bloodline of Earth Dragons. Of course, there were also pure-blooded humans. However, because these people weren't suited to practicing the cultivation techniques of the Earth Dragon sect, it was incredibly difficult for them to become elites. Right now, the main gate of the Earth Dragon sect was tightly shut. It was as if the Earth Dragon sect were trying to send the message that Ling Han and the others were unwelcome. Pong! The old ginseng kicked the gate open and shouted, "Beautiful women of the Earth Dragon sect, hand your undergarment over." Grandpa Ginseng is someone who cherishes and shows compassion to beauties. Chapter 1347, The Earth Dragon Sect, S. Reinforcements. Chapter 1347, The Earth Dragon Sect, S. Reinforcements. The Earth Dragon Sect was clearly prepared for this, and what greeted Ling Han and the others behind the main gate was a dense mob of people. An elder stepped forward and roared, "Ling Han, you've taken things too far." A black mist rose from his body, forming into numerous earth dragon-shaped tendrils. These tendrils were packed together extremely closely, and the sight of them was simply repulsive. "What? So you people refining realm pills wasn't taking things too far?" Feng Piyun asked with a humph. Even his hair was standing on ends, revealing his fury at this moment. The speed of his cultivation was relatively quick. However, due to the constraints of time, he had only just reached the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier, even with the alchemical pills provided by Ling Han. The elder completely ignored Feng Piyun's comments. Not to mention that he hadn't reached the sun-moon tier yet. As long as he was under the consummate level of the sun-moon tier, the elder wouldn't be afraid of him at all. After all, they were on completely different levels. "Humph, do you have the right to speak before me?" the elder asked in contempt. Ling Han also humphed and asked, "Well, do you have the right to act senior and haughty before me?" Boom! He unleashed his aura at the elder who had spoken. Pa! The elder's body instantly went limp, and he couldn't help but fall to his knees. However, he was a stubborn individual, and he forcefully twisted his body so that he would end up falling into a sitting position. Although this was still embarrassing, it was already many times better than kneeling before his enemies. "You're really Ling Han?" a young man in the dense mob of people asked. His face was filled with astonishment. "Oh, it's Brother Nalan." Ling Han nodded slightly as he glanced at the young man. This young man was none other than Nalan too, the king tier who had enjoyed an equal standing with him 10,000 years ago. However, he was evidently less talented than the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, the Sword Emperor, and the others. In fact, he was even less talented than Jiang Yefeng, Chen Ruijing, and the others. Right now, he still hadn't advanced to the sun-moon tier yet. He was only at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Read more chapter on novel full. After such a long time, the gulf in talent between the prodigies had finally become evident. Nalan too smiled bitterly and said, "Who would have thought that you would become so powerful? Back in the day, I could suppress you with a single strike." Ling Han's expression darkened. A real man doesn't boast about his past achievements, okay? Also, can you not reopen old wounds? So what if I was weak back then? I had another identity, okay? I was the Alchemy Emperor. Which of you hadn't come over to beg me to refine pills? Another elder stepped forward and coldly said, "Ling Han, I suggest you go back to wherever you came from. The Earth Dragon Sect isn't a place for you to act wantonly." Ling Han was slightly astonished. The Earth Dragon Sect would have definitely received news of the other 4 sects being forcefully disbanded. So how were these people still so calm and confident? It was as if they had a strong grip on the situation. Where was their confidence coming from? "Oh, you people have someone to lean on," he asked with a smile. "Wait patiently. You'll find out soon," the second elder said. Ling Han ignored him and continued, As with the 4 other sects, I'll give you people a chance. The prime culprits who made the decision to refine the realm pills must die. Those above the immortal level can all cripple their own cultivation. From today onward, disband the Earth Dragon sect. If you do so, I can spare the lives of the others. I'll give you half a day's time. After saying this, Ling Han and the others sat down in front of the main gate of the Earth Dragon sect. They then retrieved some ingredients from the Black Tower and started to enjoy a hearty barbecue. Meanwhile, the old Ginseng dashed into the Earth Dragon sect, saying, "Grandpa Ginseng is missing a few maids to massage his legs for him. Your opportunity has come. If you inhale a few breaths next to Grandpa Ginseng, I guarantee you'll feel 100 times more invigorated, and I guarantee your cultivation will advance at a rapid speed. If you manage to satisfy Grandpa Ginseng, I might even shoot you a load of my essence. You'll love it to death." His debauched utterances drew angry glares from the female disciples of the sect. They all felt that this old Ginseng was shameless and degenerate. Time slowly trickled by. Meanwhile, even though Ling Han was enjoying a barbecue with the others, he still released his divine sense to observe the entire Earth Dragon sect. However, he didn't detect any heavenly body tier being. Could the Earth Dragon sect have enlisted the help of an eternal river tier elite? Ling Han refused to believe this. After 4 hours or so, Ling Han suddenly discovered a warship sailing toward them. This warship was extremely large, yet it was also extremely quick. He activated the Eye of Truth as he gazed into the distant sky. What he saw was a gigantic warship around 30 kilometers long appearing over the horizon. It was like a large cloud, and it only took an instant for it to grow from the size of a dot to the size of a fist. This was a clear sign of just how quick it was. Such a large warship could already be treated as a starship. However, this was clearly a warship. There was a flag on its bow, and this flag was decorated with a roaring tiger as well as a large Zhao. The flag fluttered in the wind, exuding an indescribable might and intimidation. This overwhelming pressure was because of the large Zhao on the flag. This was definitely written by a supreme elite, and it was definitely imbued with their martial intent. The pressure that radiated from it was powerful enough to crush the bones of a heavenly body tier elite. Ling Han was astonished. Had the Earth Dragon sect really managed to enlist the help of an eternal river tier elite? However, what could they offer to lure an eternal river tier elite and earn their help? It wasn't long before the gigantic warship arrived close enough for everyone to see. Joy and delight instantly lit the faces of the members of the Earth Dragon sect. Meanwhile, the expressions of Feng Piyun and the others became much more stern. Right now, the Earth Dragon sect should have already known that Ling Han had advanced to the heavenly body tier. Thus, the helper that they had enlisted was definitely at or above the heavenly body tier as well. The warship stopped, and a carriage immediately flew down. This carriage was pulled by 2 white horses which had wings and a single horn on their head. These horses appeared extremely mighty, and both measured at least 30 meters in height. "Ethereal dragon horses," someone exclaimed in surprise. They had recognized the breed of these 2 majestic horses. Ethereal dragon horses were incredibly rare demonic beasts. After reaching adulthood, they could even advance to the heavenly body tier. Gasp! This person was using ethereal dragon horses to draw their carriage. This was insane. Ling Han raised his eyebrows slightly, yet he wasn't shocked. After all, he had already seen a half-intelligent mount that was forged from saintly material before, and that person's chariot had also been forged from saintly material. Compared to that, what were mere heavenly body tier ethereal dragon horses worth? The carriage quickly descended from the sky. This carriage was also extravagant, with all kinds of level 10 materials draping over its exterior. There were 10,000-year-old purple pearls, 1,000 shadow spiderwebs, black beast horns, and other luxurious items. The disciples of the Earth Dragon sect had never seen such extravagance and might before. They couldn't help but feel overjoyed. Enlisting the help of this person was definitely the right move. The carriage stopped, and the 2 ethereal dragon horses dragged their hooves over the ground. They wore expressions of condescending haughtiness. Ling Han involuntarily rubbed his hands together. There was quite a large amount of rare godly metal hanging from the carriage, just what he needed to feed his divine demon sword. He was definitely going to plunder all that godly metal. Creak. The carriage door opened, and a beautiful woman stepped out. Then another, and another, and another. They walked out one after another, and in the end, a total of 12 beautiful women had walked out. They then kneeled down and used their bodies to form a staircase. Only then did a man walk out from the carriage. He stepped on the backs of the beautiful women as he walked down to the ground. Motherfucker! The old ginseng was instantly triggered, and he shouted, "Even Grandpa Ginseng doesn't have so many beautiful women to attend to him. This brat is far too arrogant. Little Han, help Grandpa Ginseng pummel him." Chapter 1348, Zhao Ku. Chapter 1348, Zhao Ku. This man was extremely young, looking no more than 25 years old. However, taking into account the incredibly long lifespan of immortals, one's appearance definitely wasn't an accurate reflection of their age. This person was actually at the heavenly body tier. However, he was only at the early stage of the medium extreme. Moreover, he was definitely over 1 million years old as well. However, considering the long lifespan of heavenly body tier elites, he was clearly still in the prime of his life. He had reached the heavenly body tier at around 1 million years old, and this was certainly a feat to be proud of. Thus, it was no wonder that he had his nose in the air. Our respects to young Master Ku. The members of the Earth Dragon Sect all kneeled down in greeting. To say nothing of this young man's background, just his cultivation level alone was enough to subdue the members of the Earth Dragon Sect. "Rise," the young man said with a wave of his hand. He appeared extremely casual and relaxed. He swept his gaze around, and upon seeing that Ling Han and the others were still sitting around and eating, his expression instantly changed. He turned to face them, saying, "You people, why didn't you kneel upon seeing me? You dare to make Grandpa Ginseng kneel? Have you eaten too much sh*t?" The old ginseng jumped up and down in anger. He had already been jealous that this young man had so many beautiful women surrounding him. Now, this young man was even acting so haughty and arrogant. How could he not be infuriated? The young man had only been slightly irritated before. However, after hearing the old ginseng's words, his expression instantly became even colder. 12 beauties, what are you waiting for? Capture that ginseng for me. I'll make sure to pleasure you well tonight." "Understood, young master." The 12 beauties smiled as they curtsied, an alluring blush on their faces and a charming look in their eyes. The old ginseng couldn't help but stare. "Beauties, why don't you come with Grandpa Ginseng instead? My essence is definitely extremely nutritious. It'll be better to make you into ginseng soup." The 12 beauties attacked in unison. Surprisingly, they were all at the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. Moreover, they were all extremely skilled at a combination attack formation. Not only could this formation unleash their combined power at once, but it could even buff their power by a significant amount. Thus, the power of their strike was almost at the heavenly body tier. That being the case, how would the old ginseng dare to face it? He gave a weird shriek before turning around to flee. His cultivation wasn't high, yet his speed was unbelievably quick. He arrived behind Ling Han in the blink of an eye. He then poked his head out, saying, "Ladies, come get me if you dare." He then turned to Ling Han and said, "Little Han, suppress those little vixens for me. Grandpa Ginseng will provide them with guidance every night and make sure that they give up evil and return to good." The 12 beauties were furious. How was the mouth of this ginseng so toxic? "It's better that we cook you into soup." They were naturally unafraid of Ling Han. After all, they were even capable of battling against heavenly body tier elites when they teamed up. Ling Han raised a hand. Wong. His aura rippled through the air as it surged toward the 12 beauties. Pa, 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 pa. The 12 beauties instantly collapsed to the ground. This was heaven's might, and those who were stronger than Ling Han would have their battle prowess detrimentally affected. As for those who were weaker than him, they wouldn't even have the opportunity to battle against him. All they could do was lie on the ground and wait for death. The young man glared at Ling Han and said, "Impudence! You even dared to attack my maids? Are you seeking death?" His name was Zhao Ku, and his background was astonishing. Was the only child of an eternal river tier elite of the great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire. Thus, he was extremely flamboyant wherever he went. He was already accustomed to a life of luxury. Ling Han waved his hand and said, "This matter has got nothing to do with you. I suggest you go back wherever you came from." Haha. Zhao Ku couldn't help but laugh in anger. What the hell? They were still in the great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire, yet someone actually dared to speak to him like this. His voice became menacing, and he said, "Immediately kneel down and beg me for forgiveness. If I'm satisfied, perhaps I'll spare your life." However, he gazed at the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, a look of intoxication on his face. This woman, she's mine. He had seen many beautiful women before, but he had never seen a woman as beautiful and regal as the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. The 12 beauties had all been chosen extremely carefully. Not only were they beautiful, but they were also extremely talented in cultivation. However, compared to the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, the gulf between them was like night and day. Feng Piyun and the others were all infuriated upon hearing this. Meanwhile, Zhang Yefeng and some others immediately spoke back in rebuke. This was their master's wife. Ling Han's expression also became cold, and he said, "You're seeking death." He knew that this young man definitely had an eternal river tier elite behind him. However, hadn't he killed Xie Donglai without hesitation? So, why would he be afraid now? Humph, you're pretty ballsy, aren't you? However, do you know who I am? Zhao Ku asked haughtily. He loved throwing that question at others. Generally speaking, people would all be scared **tless when they learned of his identity, regardless of who they were. They would then become incredibly obedient and obsequious, afraid that they would accidentally offend him. My father is Zhao Zui. Zhao Zui was a legendary individual in the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire. According to legends, he had been a nameless disciple in some sect before. However, in a stroke of great fortune, he had entered a cave by accident and discovered the lost ultimate techniques of the sect. He started to become stronger after this discovery, and he gradually made a name for himself. Afterward, he would always discover great opportunities just as he neared the end of his lifespan. In this way, he continued to become stronger, and he continued to advance to higher cultivation levels. Hundreds of millions of years ago, Zhao Zui had already been an old and seemingly near-death elder. However, hundreds of millions of years later, his condition and appearance were still exactly the same as before. Right now, he was already over 300 million years old. However, would he come across another great opportunity and advance to the Genesis tier when he neared the end of his lifespan? No one knew. However, because he had slowly ground his way to this position from a no-name weakling, Zhao Zui didn't exactly possess the demeanor of an elite. He had all the traits and bad habits of normal people. For example, he was lustful, and he also loved fame. He also had countless wives and mistresses, but for some reason, he only had a single child, Zhao Ku. In any case, he had named his son Zhao Ku in the hopes of avoiding misfortune. He didn't want the heavens to feel jealous and eliminate the only descendant of the Zhao clan. The members of the Earth Dragon sect all wore looks of arrogance and haughtiness. Their founding ancestor had been a guard for Zhao Zui's residence before, and although this wasn't any deep relationship, it was still a little something. Now that their sect was facing an existential crisis, they had naturally recalled their relationship with Zhao Zui. Thus, they had sent someone to ask for help. They coincidentally came across Zhao Ku along the way, and after gifting him a few beautiful women, Zhao Ku had agreed to come over and help. It wasn't that Zhao Ku was satisfied with their gifts, just that he had been cultivating for a long time and wanted to go out for a spin. Ling Han was completely unfazed. He had already obtained the secret technique, the Tide of the Ages, and become intertwined with the karma of some force in the celestial realm. So, why would he be afraid of an eternal river tier elite? He looked at Zhao Ku and said, "If you really want to seek death, I'll grant you your wish. Descendants of elites like Zhao Ku would chase people like rabid dogs if they dared to disobey their will. This kind of dog couldn't be taught obedience. If Ling Han simply shooed him away, he would definitely use the power of his clan to seek revenge. Thus, since he would have to offend the Zhao clan anyway, he might as well offend them all the way and kill Zhao Ku right here and now. Anyhow, there were so many divine materials hanging on Zhao Ku's carriage, so it would be a shame if he didn't plunder it and make them his own. How dare you? Zhao Ku said with a cold sneer. Did this person really think that he was a profligate individual who could only borrow his father's name to frighten others? He was an elite at the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier. He was a genuine elite of the great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire. Moreover, as the descendant of an eternal river tier elite, would he not have powerful treasures to protect himself? Ku literally means bitter or misery. Chapter 1349, Silver Dragon Armor. Chapter 1349, Silver Dragon Armor. Earth Armor Guards. Zhao Ku roared. Numerous chariots instantly flew down from the warship and formed a neat formation behind him. There were 12 armored warriors on each chariot, and their faces were all filled with killing intent. Auras of death and destruction radiated from their bodies. The cultivation of these warriors wasn't high, and they were only at the mountain river tier. However, with hundreds upon thousands of them standing together, the aura that they exuded was powerful enough to worry even sun-moon tier cultivators. Zhao Ku raised his hand and roared, "Enter the formation. Kill the enemy." Shwa. The warriors all leaped down from their chariots. They then started to sprint along the ground, crisscrossing through each other's paths in a complex pattern. It was as if the thousands of warriors had become a single entity. It was as if they had become a giant slithering snake. As they advanced, the armor that they were suited in also radiated with a glow that gradually intertwined. This glow fused their power together, elevating their power several hundredfold. This was an extremely peculiar formation. Ling Han could sense that the spiritual chi of heaven and earth was being ferociously absorbed by them, both from the sky and from the earth. This was the main reason behind their explosive increase in power. If it were an ordinary person, absorbing spiritual chi like this would definitely exceed the limits of their body and blow them up into pieces. However, through the connection of their formation, these warriors were able to evenly distribute the pressure that they faced. As a result, the amount of spiritual chi that they could absorb also increased by several hundredfold. Interesting, Ling Han thought to himself with a smile. It would be nice if he could teach this formation to the soldiers of the Great Ling Empire. That way, they would be able to elevate their overall battle prowess by quite a bit. "Master, allow me to battle them," Ding Ping immediately said. He had already reached the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier, and thus his battle prowess was already extremely close to the sun-moon tier. "Master, this disciple also wants to battle," Chen Ruijing and his 3 other disciples also said. They couldn't allow the youngest disciple to outdo them. Ling Han nodded with a smile and said, "Go ahead." His 5 disciples charged toward the enemies. The previous 3 sects had all surrendered upon seeing Ling Han, so none of them had gotten the chance to battle against enemies. Now that the Earth Dragon sect was daring to resist, they were naturally itching to charge over and engage in battle. "Haha, 4th brother, you can stay back and guard the rear. Your elder brother is also itching to do battle," Feng Piyun said with a hearty laugh. "4th brother, we'll leave the rear to you." Murongqing was also hungry for some action. They were all from the lower realm, and if it hadn't been for Ling Han opening the sky, it was extremely likely that they would have all been refined into a realm pill by now. Thus, they naturally detested the 5 sects with every fiber of their being. They would feel distressed and pin up if they didn't pummel the 5 sects with their own 2 hands. After Feng Piyun and Murongqing both charged into battle, the heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden turned around to nod at Ling Han, signifying that she would stay back to guard the rear. All Ling Han needed to do was take care of Zhao Ku. After charging into the enemy formation, the figures of Feng Piyun and the 6 others were quickly drowned out by enemy bodies. They appeared especially lonely and fragile among the enemy ranks. Although Feng Piyun and Murong Qing hadn't reached the Sun Moon tier yet, they had both advanced to the consummate level of the Mountain River tier already. Thus, they definitely wouldn't be afraid of the enemy warriors. In fact, they could easily achieve victory even if they were to battle against 10 enemy warriors at once. However, the warriors had combined their battle prowess through a peculiar formation, which allowed them to possess battle prowess at the Sun Moon tier. This was definitely beyond what Feng Piyun and Murong Qing could handle. It wasn't long before they became bloody and wounded. Fortunately, there was Ding Ping to look after his two uncles and ensure their safety. However, this made Feng Piyun and Murong Qing feel slightly agitated. Back in the lower realm, they had all been prodigies and elites, yet they were now being protected by their junior. This ignited their fighting spirit and sparked their will to fight beyond their limits. If they could maintain this rage and survive the battle, their strength would definitely grow significantly. Ling Han glanced over and immediately felt at ease. His eyes became as piercing as a sword as he turned his gaze to Zhao Ku. What Zhao Ku, want, I get. Zhao Ku said with haughty confidence. This woman will definitely become my plaything. However, there's no need for you to worry. I'll only toy with her for a few days. At most, I'll only toy with her for a few years. No woman in the world is worthy of staying with me forever. Anyhow, with this relationship between us, perhaps I'll even answer your begging for help if you end up needing my help in the future. He wore a mocking smile as he said this, and it was clear that he was trying to humiliate Ling Han. Ling Han used his fingers as a sword and immediately attacked Zhao Ku, saying, "Evil people die from speaking too much." Shua. The power of lightning transformed into an arc of divine lightning that struck at Zhao Ku. Who in the world could escape from the divine lightning of heavenly tribulation? Pa! A streak of bluish-white light flashed across Zhao Ku's chest before he even had the time to react. Shredded cloth instantly exploded into the air, and even Zhao Ku's protective origin power was unable to prevent the divine lightning from striking his body. However, as the pieces of shredded cloth cleared, they could all see that Zhao Ku was actually wearing a suit of silver armor beneath his clothing. This suit of armor was filled with divine patterns, which were all pulsating with a soft glow at this moment. This suit of silver armor had completely blocked Ling Han's burst of divine lightning. Zhao Ku looked down, and he couldn't help but laugh loudly, saying, "This is the silver dragon armor that my father bestowed upon me. It's forged from level 13 godly metal, so there's no way you'll be able to damage it unless your power can reach the Eternal River tier. Moreover, my father infused a drop of the Moon Tortoise Divine Beast's blood essence into this godly metal. In other words, this armor possesses an incredibly powerful defense. If you can't damage my armor, you won't be able to eliminate the defensive power of my armor. If you can't eliminate the defensive power of my armor, you won't be able to hurt even a hair of mine. I'm already standing in a position of invincibility, so how are you going to battle against me?" Zhao Ku wasn't afraid to reveal the secrets of his silver dragon armor. This was because he was confident that no one below the rank of the Eternal River tier could defeat him. This is indeed a problem, Ling Han thought to himself. There was a deep frown on his face. The fact that Zhao Ku's armor was forged from level 13 godly metal wasn't overly important. Regardless of how sturdy it was the armor itself that was sturdy, not its wearer. Even if he couldn't shatter the armor, he could still deal a huge amount of damage to its wearer through the shock of a powerful strike. However, the problem was that this armor had been infused with a drop of the Moon Tortoise's blood essence. The addition of this blood essence had added an extra defensive barrier around the armor. In fact, there were two methods to breach this defensive barrier. The first was to shatter the defensive barrier, and the second was to shatter the silver dragon armor. However, both of these feats required that his power reach the Eternal River tier, yet Ling Han was only at the low extreme of the Heavenly Body tier. Sigh, why is it so hard to kill this person? Ha ha ha, are you feeling helpless now? Are you feeling despair now? Zhao Ku couldn't help but laugh heartily. He loved obliterating the willpower of his opponents. Seeing the looks of despair on their faces filled him with a sense of intense satisfaction. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Perhaps the helpless person will soon be you." "Me?" Zhao Ku faltered for a moment before exploding into laughter. "Have you gone stupid? How is that possible? How is it not possible?" Ling Han charged over, yet his target wasn't Zhao Ku. Instead, it was the members of the Earth Dragon Sect. He threw a strike, and a devastating power instantly hammered into the earth. Pa, 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 pa. Many members of the Earth Dragon Sect were instantly smashed into pieces. Both their bodies and divine senses were obliterated. Zhao Ku was infuriated by this. He naturally couldn't care less about the lives of the people. However, Ling Han actually dared to disregard his presence. "You dare to ignore me?" Zhao Ku roared in anger before opening his mouth to spit out a miniature sword. This sword gradually grew in size, eventually transforming into a 3-feet-long azure sword. He gripped this sword in his hand and made a slashing motion at Ling Han. Sword light instantly surged out, forming into a giant black snake that widened its jaws and bit at Ling Han. Chapter 1350, Scared sh** tless. Chapter 1350 Scared sh** tless. Ling Han turned around to reply with a punch. Pung! Divine light exploded into the surroundings as his fist struck the head of the giant black snake and shattered it into pieces. "You can't stop me." Ling Han continued to slaughter the disciples of the Earth Dragon Sect. This had been his aim for coming here anyway, so he naturally couldn't give up simply due to the arrival of Zhao Ku. "Hurry, run. Activate the Sect protecting formation and bring out the ancestral weapon." The disciples of the Earth Dragon Sect were all astounded. They hadn't imagined that Ling Han would actually be so wanton. Zhao Ku had made his intentions clear already, yet he still dared to attack them so recklessly. Just how arrogant was he? Fortunately, both their Sect protecting formation and ancestral weapon were already charged up and ready to go. It was only because Ling Han had caught them by surprise that they hadn't activated these so far. Wong! The entire marshland lit up as the large Sect-protecting formation started to circulate. Meanwhile, a colossal earth dragon materialized in the sky as the ancestral weapon was activated. This earth dragon had neither eyes nor a nose nor ears, and it looked incredibly repulsive. Ling Han was completely unfazed. Pong, pong, pong. With just 3 punches, the Sect-protecting formation was blasted into pieces. Along with it, the Earth Dragon was also smashed into smithereens. He was already at the late stage of the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier, so how could these Sun-Moon tier formations and weapons withstand his power? He was unstoppable as he advanced, and the Earth Dragon Sect started to suffer more and more casualties. This time, Ling Han finally revealed the ruthless side of himself. He had already given the Earth Dragon Sect a chance. Since they didn't take it, they naturally had to suffer the consequences. Die! Divine light flashed through the air as Ling Han mercilessly threw his fists again and again. He had unleashed a battle prowess that was invincible among his cultivation level, so how could the mere Earth Dragon Sect withstand his rage? They were like defenseless puppets as they were killed one after another. Damn it! Damn it! Zhao Ku continued to pursue Ling Han, yet his speed wasn't fast enough for him to catch up. His efforts were futile, no matter how hard he tried. He was seething with rage, and he felt as if he were being toyed around with by Ling Han. No one had ever dared to toy around with him like this before. He continued to toss all kinds of god tools into the air. These had naturally been given to him by his father. However, in his hands, these god tools could only unleash a destructive power at the early stage of the high extreme of the heavenly body tier, regardless of how powerful they actually were. This was far from enough to threaten Ling Han's freakish physique. At most, they could only cause him some minor wounds. In any case, Ling Han's grasp of the indestructible Heaven Scroll had already soared to a new height. Thus, he could easily heal these minor wounds in an instant. In fact, this still wasn't the full limit of his capabilities. After all, he had only unlocked the 5th level of the Black Tower not long ago. When he fully comprehended the true essence of the indestructible heaven scroll defense, his physique and defense would undergo another transformation and elevate to a new height. Zhao Ku had a powerful armor and defensive barrier, so Ling Han wasn't able to wound him. Similarly, Zhao Ku couldn't wound Ling Han no matter how many god tools he had. All he could do was pursue him in vain. His expression would become a shade darker each time Ling Han killed a disciple of the Earth Dragon Sect. This wasn't out of compassion, but rather out of shame and humiliation. His opponent was blatantly humiliating him. "You're dead meat." Zhao Ku came to a difficult decision in his mind, and he retrieved a decree from his storage ring. This decree had been created by his father, who had used the fusion of his martial intent and blood essence to write it. Upon being unfurled, this decree would unleash the power of an eternal river tier elite. This power was formidable enough to kill Ling Han 100 times over. However, creating such a decree was extremely taxing, even for eternal river tier elites. Thus, even someone like Zhao Ku only had a single such decree on him. Right now, all he wanted to do was kill Ling Han. Wang. A brilliant light instantly exploded into the surroundings as the decree was unfurled. The martial intent of an eternal river tier elite fluctuated through the air, forming a devastating power that was capable of suppressing all beings. Go! Ling Han flicked his hands and tossed the notionless saint out. Brat, I was trying to cultivate. The notionless saint had been cultivating under the reincarnation tree when he was suddenly tossed out. Thus, he was naturally extremely annoyed. However, he couldn't help but laugh upon seeing the decree in Zhao Ku's hand. Die! Zhao Ku roared. The decree lit up again as a person walked out from within it. This person was like a god, and he possessed a domineering aura that made him seem like the ruler of the world. This was a projection that had been formed by the martial intent of Zhao Zui. Although its battle prowess couldn't compare to the real Zhao Zui's, it still possessed at least 1/10,000th of his power. In any case, this was still power at the Eternal River tier, and thus it was still capable of obliterating any heavenly body tier elite. The projection swatted its palm at Ling Han and the notionless saint. Humph! The notionless saint humphed coldly, and his Genesis tier aura instantly surged into the surroundings, suppressing the aura of Zhao Zui's projection. A mere eternal river tier cultivator like you dares to stand up against me? The notionless saint made a grabbing motion at the projection. Pa! Zhao Zui's projection was instantly destroyed, unable to put up even a shred of resistance. Fuck! Zhao Ku's eyes widened in shock. His face was a picture of disbelief. This decree had been his biggest trump card, and it was something that could have killed any heavenly body tier elite. Theoretically speaking, there were only a dozen or so eternal river tier elites in the Great Crimson Sun Imperial Empire. In other words, he was the most powerful person apart from these 12 or so elites. Thus, he could kill anyone that he wanted to kill. He had merely come to the Earth Dragon Sect to mess around out of boredom, yet he had actually come across such a terrifying being. This person had obliterated the decree created by his father with a casual grab of his hand. Just how powerful was he? Zhao Ku started to tremble in fright. Who told him to unleash a decree? The notionless saint had lost his Genesis tier power long ago, yet he hadn't lost his grasp of the regulations. Coincidentally, decrees didn't contain power, but rather the martial intent of the creator. This was also a form and comprehension of the regulations of heaven and earth. Zhao Ku had tried to use the martial intent of an eternal river tier elite to attack a Genesis tier saint. Wasn't this seeking death? If Zhao Ku charged over right now and launched a punch at the notionless saint, the weakness of this saint would instantly be revealed. However, Zhao Ku was already going weak at the knees, so how would he dare to attack? He was at the heavenly body tier, so he could naturally sense the majestic aura that was radiating from the notionless saint. This aura was far richer and far more profound than his father's aura. This was an ultimate elite. Zhao Ku knew that he had picked a fight with the wrong person. This was someone who was even more powerful than his father. How the fuck could he have predicted this? A tiny force like the Earth Dragon Sect had actually offended someone with such a terrifying background. Zhao Ku felt that he had been screwed over by the Earth Dragon sect. His name was indeed a reflection of his current situation, fucking miserable. Ling Han noticed the shift in Zhao Ku's expression, and he said, Zhao Ku, I'm not a bloodthirsty person either. How about this? Leave your worship, chariots, god tools, and whatnot behind, and I'll spare your life. This was called getting things for free. Zhao Ku was overjoyed. He could still get out of this alive? I'll give them to you. I'll give them all to you, he hurriedly said. This warship was his father's, and he had spent a lot of time and effort to construct it. The chariots were also incredibly valuable. However, what did this matter? Were these as important as his life? However, Zhao Ku still glanced over at the notionless saint. This was the true ultimate elite, and Ling Han's offer would only count if he also agreed. The notionless saint wore a profound expression, and he calmly said, Is there a need to ask me about such trivial matters? What good acting. Zhao Ku hurriedly tossed all of his god tools onto the ground. However, he still wasn't willing to take off his silver dragon armor. This was his final life-saving god tool. Ling Han pondered for a moment before deciding against pushing Zhao Ku too far. Otherwise, if he believed that he would die and counterattacked in despair, the notionless saint was merely all talk and no substance. You can leave now, Ling Han said with a wave of his hand. Chapter 1351, Highest Jade Essence Hear. Chapter 1351, Highest Jade Essence Hear. Zhao Ku didn't dare to make a peep as he hurriedly left with his 12 beauties and warriors. As for whether or not he hated Ling Han and wanted to take revenge for this, only he himself would know. The remaining members of the Earth Dragon Sect all felt pure despair. Even Zhao Ku had fled with his tail between his legs. To say nothing of the terrifying Ling Han, even if he patted his hands and left, would Zhao Ku forgive them for this? You've inflicted this fate upon yourselves. Ling Han was merciless as he massacred them. Feng Puyun, Ding Ping, and the others all joined in on the massacre of the Earth Dragon sect. However, they weren't depraved and bloodthirsty people, after all, so they stopped after killing everyone who was culpable. As for the remaining people, they crippled their cultivation before letting them go. They were free to live out the remainder of their short lives. Ling Han and the others all felt solemn after this massacre. None of them felt the joy or delight of exacting revenge. However, the 5 sects had finally been relegated to the annals of history. They had finally cut this ribbon of fate, and there would be no more lingering thoughts of the 5 sects in the future. Ling Han collected his spoils of battle. However, the warship was far too large, and even he couldn't wrap his divine sense around its entire body and bring it into the Black Tower. Moreover, its huge size meant that it couldn't be landed in most places. In other words, this warship could only stay in the air and continue to consume exorbitant amounts of true origin stones. Ling Han wasn't profligate enough to waste his resources on such a luxurious yet useless warship. He started a huge demolition job, ripping all kinds of valuable items off the gigantic warship. For example, he took godly metal and true origin stones. The godly metal was obviously for his divine demon sword to consume, while the true origin stones were essentially money. He also collected all kinds of other materials. He could sell these in the future. After ripping off the final formation, the gigantic warship naturally lost its ability to fly. It crashed down from the sky. However, Ling Han had already flown the warship to an uninhabited place deep in the marshlands before his huge demolition job. Thus, the warship naturally wouldn't cause too much damage when it eventually crashed down. However, the huge impact of the crash still triggered an earthquake that affected some of the surrounding areas. Fortunately, this was the immortal realm, where the foundation of the land was incredibly stable. Otherwise, the destruction caused by the crash would have definitely been 10,000 times more severe. Ling Han came out of this battle with a rich supply of loot. Although he had plundered Zhao Ku, he had essentially been plundering the wealth of an eternal river tier. Thus, his yield was naturally astonishingly bountiful. After devouring the large amount of godly metal that he had obtained, the quality of Ling Han's divine demon sword successfully advanced to level 9. Moreover, After the shrinkage from before, it was now gradually starting to grow back in size. Although it still hadn't returned to its original size yet, it had already reached a length of around 2 feet. Ling Han was extremely satisfied with this. They left the Earth Dragon Sect and headed toward the nearest city. Ling Han still needed to sell the huge amounts of materials that he had ripped out from the gigantic warship. This would earn him a huge sum of money. Perhaps he would even be able to purchase enough level 9 godly metal to raise the quality of his divine demon sword to level 10. If that were to happen, the divine demon sword's cultivation level would surpass Ling Han's. They arrived at Gathering Wind City. This was a huge city, and there were even heavenly body tier elites overlooking it. Cultivation and business were both booming in this city. Since they wanted to sell things, they naturally had to look for the gold origin auction house. Ling Han handed this task to his disciples. There was no need for him to personally attend to everything. After a few hours, his 5 disciples returned. They had already handed the materials to the auction house. Moreover, they also brought with them some unexpected news. The Gold Origin auction house was going to hold a large auction soon, and one of the items would be the highest Jade Essence Heart. Highest Jade Essence Heart. This was what Old Man Su had asked Ling Han to search for. The old man hadn't told him why, but he had asked Ling Han to obtain it at all costs and bring it back to him if he were to ever come across it. Ling Han had never forgotten this request. In fact, he had even asked his 3 brothers and 5 disciples to keep this request in mind. Who would have thought that they would come across the highest Jade Essence Heart here? Master, what's the use of this thing? Ding Ping asked. Ling Han shrugged and replied, I don't know, either. His 5 disciples all felt confused. Why was their master looking for this item if he didn't know its uses? Ling Han laughed and said, I'm sure we'll find out about its uses if we ask around. These 5 disciples, geez, since they know that there's a highest Jade Essence Heart for sale, why didn't they ask about its uses? If Ding Ping and the others could read Ling Han's thoughts, they would definitely feel extremely hard done by. They thought that Ling Han already knew about its uses. After all, it was his instruction for them to keep an eye out for it. After they learned of its auction, they had hurriedly run back to tell him about it. Ling Han wandered around to gather some information about the highest Jade Essence Heart. In the end, he learned that this item had 2 uses. First, it could be used to suppress and dissolve fire poison. Second, it could be used to save one's life. This was a godly medicine that was nurtured by heaven and earth, so it was even more effective than many other divine pills. However, this also meant that the highest Jade Essence Heart was incredibly valuable. As such, it would naturally attract attention and bids from many people. After all, life-saving treasures were the most valuable things. Moreover, with this item in hand, one could also increase their chances of finding treasures in ancient sites that were covered in intense flames. Ling Han couldn't help but sigh. He was always faced with the same problem. He didn't have enough money. Although he could make a huge sum of money from the materials that he had handed the auction house, who knew whether this would be enough to win the bid for the highest Jade Essence Heart? In any case, he still wanted to purchase some more godly metal. How can I make more money? Master, there's a tournament ground in this city, and one can place bets there. For each battle that you win, you can double the value of your bet. If you win 10 battles in a row, you can receive 1,000 times the value of your bet. However, if you lose even a single battle, you won't make a single cent at all, Jiang Yefeng said. Oh! Ling Han's eyes instantly lit up, and he asked, is it fair? If one won 9 battles in a row, yet the tournament ground owner dispatched a cultivator 1 major tier above to them in the 10th battle, how could one ever achieve 10 victories in a row? Participants will only come across opponents at the same cultivation level, Jiang Yefeng replied. However, Master, you can't participate in this tournament ground. Why not? Because there's a rule stating that only those below the heavenly body tier can participate, Jiang Yefeng said with a chuckle. Ling Han was speechless. However, the existence of such a rule made a lot of sense. Although this city was overlooked by heavenly body tier elites, this also signified that heavenly body tier elites were the strongest beings in this place. They were like the kings of this city, so how could they stoop as low as participating in a tourney? Go! Everyone participate in the tournament ground to win me some money. Ling Han could only pin his hopes on the others. Ding Ping patted his chest and said, "Leave it to me. I definitely won't disappoint you, master." "No, leave it to me," Chun Ruijing hurriedly said. Ling Han's disciples scrambled to help him solve his money problem. Feng Piyun walked over and said, "Haha, fourth brother, Mu Rongqing and I also want to give this tournament a go." Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, "Among us, Ding Ping has the greatest chance of winning 10 battles in a row. After all, he's already reached the middle stage of the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier. He should be invincible among cultivators at the same cultivation level." Everyone nodded in agreement. People would only come across opponents at the same cultivation level in battle, though the definition of same cultivation level encapsulated everyone from the early stage to the consummate level. In other words, there could be a power difference of 3 or even 4 stars. To most cultivators, reaching 4 stars was already the limit. Thus, someone at the early stage of a tier would definitely be at a huge disadvantage if they were to come across someone at the consummate level of the tier. That being the case, it was natural that people would only participate in the tournament ground battles when they reached the consummate level of their tier. This way, they could at least guarantee that they wouldn't be at a disadvantage in terms of cultivation level. However, how many people in the world could reach the pinnacle level? Extremely few. Those who could reach the pinnacle level were genuine king tiers. Then we'll let Ding Ping battle first. He can win us 1,000 times our bet. Ling Han came to a decision, and he handed all of his true origin stones to Ding Ping. Ding Ping patted his chest and said, "Master, leave it to me." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.